What's up, guys? CrumbleBob here, and I've got a full lineup of stories today, all about betrayal from the ones who should have been the closest. Sure, it's tough and a little depressing, but hey, that's life. So sit back, chill, and let's find out how things turned out for the betrayers. So I, 43F, have a complex family situation that started many years ago. My sister, 47F, had a child when she was 22, and I was 18. Let's call him Luke. From the very start, my sister and her then boyfriend, now husband, showed almost no interest in Luke. From the outset, my sister and her then boyfriend displayed almost no interest in Luke. I'm not overstating, they essentially behaved as if he didn't exist. They would go out to parties, leave him with anyone available, and never even check in. There were instances when I'd return home from school and discover him in a dirty diaper that hadn't been changed for hours. After a few weeks of this, I couldn't bear it any longer. I was young and scared, but I took charge because no one else would. I wound up caring for Luke most of the time. My grandmother, God bless her soul, looked after him while I completed my final year of high school. In return, I would clean her home and cook for her on weekends. It wasn't perfect, but we managed to make it work somehow. My parents didn't offer much assistance either. They'd provide me with about $100 a month for Luke, which amounts to very little if you've ever had to care for a baby. Formula alone consumed that in no time. Diapers, clothes, doctor visits, it all accumulates so quickly. My grandmother and I were the only ones who actually gave a shit about him. I recall having to miss senior prom because I couldn't afford both the dress and Luke's formula that month. Not that I regret it, but just to offer insight into what it was like. Around a year after I finished high school, matters grew even more difficult. My parents decided they'd grown tired of our presence. I returned home one day to find my belongings packed in garbage bags by the front entrance. My sister plainly told me she wished she'd never given birth to Luke. Who speaks that way about their own child? I can still recall his small face looking up at me, not comprehending what was occurring. So my grandmother and I visited a family law attorney, and my sister and her husband relinquished their parental rights to me. Just like that, they signed the documents as if disposing of an old sofa or something. I gained full custody of Luke when I was hardly an adult myself. I moved in with my grandmother. She looked after Luke while I attended community college and worked part-time at this lousy retail job that scarcely paid minimum wage. The manager was constantly trying to get me to work additional shifts, but I had to study and care for Luke, so it was an ongoing struggle. I was perpetually drained. Sometimes I'd drift off studying at the kitchen table and wake with drool on my textbooks. It was fucking hard, particularly when my grandmother passed away when Luke was 6. Those initial weeks without her, I wasn't sure how we would manage. She bequeathed most of her possessions to me in her will, which abruptly sparked my parents' and sister's interest in reconnecting with Luke and me. Right, sure. They believed they could come in and claim a share of the inheritance. The house wasn't even particularly nice, merely a small 2-bedroom in an older area, but it was ours, and it signified we had a secure place to reside. That brief reunion didn't endure. I informed them they could either behave properly or never see us again. My dad actually opted to make an effort, and now we're quite close. He assists with the children occasionally and calls consistently. My mom and I don't converse much, but at least she's civil to Luke when she encounters him, which isn't frequent. Around this period, I met my current husband at the community college. He was attending evening classes while working during the day. We connected immediately, but I was extremely careful about introducing him to Luke. I didn't want Luke to become attached to someone who might not remain. We dated for a year before I eventually allowed them to meet. I recall being so anxious I could hardly eat that day. Fortunately, they bonded almost at once. My husband is wonderful with children and treated Luke as if he mattered from the very first day. He would play those silly video games with him for hours and never grumbled. He'd even read him bedtime stories, using distinct voices for each character. Small gestures that mean everything to a child. When Luke was 8, both my sister and I became pregnant around the same period. I discovered I was pregnant first, and then about a month later, learned through my dad that my sister was also expecting. And wouldn't you know it, my sister abruptly decided she wished Luke back in her life. She began calling and requesting to see him. Initially, I thought perhaps her pregnancy had made her grasp what she'd discarded, and maybe it would be beneficial for Luke to have some connection with his birth mother. Boy, was I mistaken. She began telling him that my husband and I wouldn't love him anymore once my biological son arrived. She would utter things like, "They're going to have their real baby now, so they probably won't want you anymore." Or, "When their real son is born, you'll see how differently they treat him." Utterly cruel things to say to a child. We only discovered this when Luke broke down crying, one day, pleading with us not to abandon him. He was sobbing so intensely he could barely articulate the words. When he eventually disclosed what my sister and her husband had been uttering, I was furious. Luke understands he's not my biological son, but he is unequivocally my son in every significant aspect. We've always been truthful with him about his origins, but in a manner that made it evident he was desired and loved. I severed ties with my sister and her husband once more after that. We engaged in family therapy and individual therapy for Luke. The therapist stated some children internalize rejection from birth parents and fault themselves, so we aimed to ensure Luke understood none of this was his doing. When I had my second child, actually my first pregnancy, strange to consider it that way, I made certain Luke knew our affection for him hadn't altered at all. The initial few months with a newborn and an 8-year-old proved challenging. I was recuperating from a C-section, nursing continuously, and striving to ensure Luke didn't feel excluded. My husband took some leave from work to assist, and my dad would visit occasionally to take Luke to the park or movies so he could have dedicated time without the infant. Luke was truly wonderful with his brother, so tender and protective from the very beginning. A couple of years later, my sister contacted me again. She sent an extensive email stating she had erred and wished to make amends. I wasn't convinced initially, but she persisted. After discussing it with my husband and Luke, we opted for low contact with her. To clarify, low contact involves encountering them at certain family gatherings, and sometimes allowing my niece, my sister's daughter, to spend time with my children. No more than that. I never left Luke unaccompanied with her, and I always followed up with him afterward to confirm he was all right. Over the years, my husband and I have done in with him afterwards to ensure he was fine. Over the years, my husband and I have fared quite well for ourselves. He completed his degree and secured a good job in his field, and I eventually obtained my nursing license. We purchased a larger house in a pleasant neighborhood with good schools. We live comfortably while my sister and her husband sometimes face financial difficulties. They're constantly between jobs or encountering some crisis or another. Her husband will work for a few months, then resign because he dislikes the atmosphere or some nonsense. They've moved approximately 4 times in the past 10 years because they repeatedly face eviction. My children participate in extracurricular activities. Luke played baseball for years and now attends debate club, and my younger son is very interested in football and computer programming. They receive thoughtful presents at Christmas and birthdays, and we take one major family trip each summer. Last year, we visited the beach for 2 weeks and rented this house directly on the water. My sister and her husband cannot afford much of that. Their daughter, my niece, doesn't get to participate in many activities or go on trips. I do feel sorry for her. It's not her fault that her parents behave as they do. When my niece was about 9, my sister began making remarks about how I needed to pay for this or that for her. It's not her fault that her parents behave as they do. When my niece was about 9, my sister began making remarks about how I needed to pay for this or that for her. Initially, it was small items, such as school supplies or new shoes. Then it escalated to her wanting me to cover dance classes, summer camp, a new phone. I informed her that wasn't my responsibility. I gave my niece thoughtful presents for her birthday and Christmas, and occasionally took her shopping or to the movies, but nowhere near the extent to which I treat my own children. Why would I? I recall one instance when my sister called, asking me to pay for my niece's school pictures, because she had forgotten it was picture day and lacked the money. I sent her $30 for the basic package, and then later discovered she used it to purchase cigarettes instead. My niece didn't even receive her pictures. After that, I began buying items directly for my niece instead of giving money to my sister. There were a few years where things were relatively calm. We'd see them at family gatherings, exchange pleasantries, and go our separate ways. My niece would visit sometimes and spend time with my boys. They'd play video games or watch movies, and it seemed all right. No major drama, just the occasional tension when my sister would make snide remarks about our house or car or whatever. So now my second son is approaching 17, and my husband and I were discussing getting him an inexpensive starter car. We did the same for Luke when he turned 17. Nothing fancy, just a used Honda with decent mileage and good safety ratings. Luke had to contribute some of his own money from his part-time job, and he's responsible for gas and helping with insurance. It's been a good lesson and responsibility for him. My niece is also turning 17 around the same time, and my sister apparently told her she was getting a car too. The problem is my sister can't afford to buy her a car, so she asked me to do it. Just called me up out of the blue and said, "So Emily's birthday's coming up, and she's expecting a car like her cousin's got. I was thinking you could handle that since you guys have so much money." I was honestly stunned. I told her I wasn't going to buy her daughter a car. I didn't promise one, and it's not my responsibility. My sister got mad and started going on about how I think I'm better than her, and how I've always been the favorite, and how unfair it is that her daughter has to suffer, because they're not as fancy as us. I told her maybe if she or her husband held down a job for more than 6 months at a time, they could afford things for their daughter. That was probably a low blow, but I was pissed. My sister got mad and didn't talk to me for a while, which was actually kind of nice, to be honest. I thought maybe she'd dropped the whole car thing and was figuring out an alternative for my niece. Maybe a payment plan or helping her get a job to save up, what normal parents do. But no, that would be too sensible for my sister. Then came my son's 17th birthday, and we surprised him with a car. He was so excited, leaping up and down and embracing everyone. It was a pleasant moment. A couple days later, my niece called me, shouting and weeping, asking why I despise her, and why I can't treat her identically to her brother, meaning Luke. She said she'd been telling all her friends she was getting a car for her birthday, and now she was going to look like a liar, and it was entirely my fault. I endeavored to stay calm. I explained that circumstances are different. Luke is my son, she is my niece. I'm her aunt, and nothing beyond that. As an aunt, my role is birthday presents, Christmas presents, and being present when it counts. That's all. Then I told her that her brother, meaning Luke, will always hold more importance to me than she ever will. The moment those words left my mouth, I knew they sounded harsh. Yet, it's the truth. Luke is my son. I've brought him up since he was a baby. I've been there for every fever, every bad dream, every heartbreak, every triumph. Of course, he means more to me than my niece, whom I see only a few times a year. That's simply how it is. She started shouting at me again, saying I'm being unfair, and disconnected the call. Then my sister called to scold me about how I need to do more. She said I was showing favoritism, and it wasn't fair to Emily. I told her if she hadn't promised a car to her daughter, or my money to my niece, none of this would have occurred. I stated perhaps she should try being a parent, instead of expecting others to provide for her child. A couple of days have passed, and I'm receiving calls and texts from various family members, and some of my sister's friends, labeling me a bitch and other pleasantries. My aunt phoned and stated I ought to be ashamed for not assisting family in distress. I wanted to inquire where the fuck she was when I was 18 caring for a baby that wasn't mine, but I simply disconnected the call instead. I do feel regret because my children did grow up with more, and perhaps I could have offered more assistance. But a vehicle? That's a significant expense, and my niece hasn't done anything to merit it. My sons both maintain excellent grades, perform chores around the house, and hold part-time jobs. They've demonstrated responsibility. My niece barely passes her courses and has never been employed a day in her life, to my knowledge. So, IDA for what I said to my niece? Update 1. Holy shit. I wasn't anticipating this post to gain so much traction like it did. Many thanks for all the awards and such, I suppose. Yet more importantly, thank you for all the counsel. I genuinely appreciate everything everyone shared, even those who think I'm the asshole. Some of you raised valid points about how I could have managed things more effectively. Firstly, I wish to clarify something as many individuals appear to be misinterpreting. I never permitted my sister to harm my children, as some of you believe. The limited contact was primarily for my niece's advantage. When birthdays or holidays approached, we would discuss when I would pick up my niece, how long I would keep her, and when I would drop her off. My sister has never cared for my children, never visited my house, and never spoken to them without me or my husband present. Some people inquired why I didn't sever ties completely after what happened when Luke was 8. Honestly, I likely ought to have. But my dad was attempting to keep some semblance of family together, and I suppose I felt guilty or something. Moreover, Emily was only an infant then. It wasn't her fault her mom behaves as she does. Another reason for maintaining a cordial relationship with my sister stems from the fact that Emily and my second son, let's call him Justin, attended the same school. So my sister attended any school events they had. It would have been incredibly awkward to entirely disregard her at every band concert or football game, particularly with other parents present. So we performed this unusual routine of acting courteously in public and largely steering clear of one another otherwise. My children and niece shared a positive relationship prior to this car situation. Justin and Emily were in the same grade and shared several classes together over the years. They weren't best friends or anything, but they got along fine. Justin would assist Emily with math sometimes because she finds it challenging. Emily and Luke also shared a friendly relationship, though there's a more significant age gap there, so they weren't as close. I always made sure my kids were happy with how much my sister was in their lives, which was virtually not at all, except for some school events and infrequent family gatherings. Luke especially, I always checked in with him after any interaction with my sister to make sure he was okay. He's a kind child with a big heart, but he doesn't trust her, and I don't blame him. So, 2 days after Emily's furious call, I decided to meet up with her at a park near my house. I thought neutral territory might be better than having her come to my home. It was one of those uncommonly warm spring days, and I remember thinking how absurd it felt to be having this discussion on such a beautiful day. When we met, Emily appeared normal, but tired. She had shadows under her eyes as if she hadn't been sleeping well. I bought us both ice cream, probably not the best lunch, but anyway, and we sat at this picnic table away from everyone else. I told her I didn't mean to hurt her, but she needs to understand it's not my job to buy her a car because I'm not her parent. I tried to be gentle, but I also wasn't going to sugarcoat it. She said she understood, but was jealous that Luke and Justin received everything they wanted. I had to clarify a couple of things for her. First, Luke isn't her brother, but her cousin. I know biologically they're siblings, but regarding how they were raised, they're cousins. Second, my boys don't get everything they want. They work for what they get. They get good grades, do chores, and avoid trouble, mostly. There was that time Justin tried to sneak out to a party, but that's another story. I asked her what the true reason was for her behavior, given she never had a problem before with the differences in our lifestyles. She was quiet for a long time, picking at the wrapper of her ice cream cone. Then she started crying, saying it was unjust that Luke and Justin get everything while she gets hardly anything, that Luke was fortunate by being adopted by my husband and me, that she is entitled to what my sons have because she's family too, so I have to care for her. I felt bad for her. I really did. It's not her fault her parents are terrible, but I also wasn't going to assume responsibility for her like I had for Luke. That was a wholly distinct situation, and I was a different individual then, young and maybe a little naive about what I was getting myself into. I told her that yes, she's family, but not my child. I do love her, but she's not my responsibility. Her parents are the ones who need to step up and provide for her. If they can't afford a car right now, maybe they could help her get a job so she can save up, or look into other transportation options. She just stared at the ground, not really responding. So I asked why she feels so strongly about this. Why it's suddenly become such a big issue when she's never complained before about the differences in our lives. After some time, she stated that even though her parents attend to her fundamental needs, she feels like she's merely an obligation to them. She's envious because she believes we don't view our sons as an obligation. She mentioned we're consistently together and always resolve issues and assist one another. And even though I maintained her presence in my life and included her with my family occasionally, she was always envious that she had to depart while Luke got to remain. "Sometimes I wish you had taken me too," she uttered, which genuinely saddened me a bit. But also, what was I meant to do? Abduct her as an infant? Her parents never disregarded her the way they did Luke. They're not earning any Parent of the Year accolades, but they nourish her and dress her and provide shelter. I clarified that while I comprehend her feelings, I'm not going to treat her as my child. I didn't bring her up, but I do love her. It's her parents' responsibility to acquire her a car or assist her in obtaining one. She became agitated again, stating I clearly don't care about her, and she departed. I sat there for a while, feeling awful. After I got home, my husband and I discussed the whole situation for hours. We decided to call my sister. I told her that my family and I are going completely no contact. We're finished with the drama, finished with the guilt trips, finished with all of it. My sister asked how I was going to keep in touch with Emily. I said Emily is nearly an adult and can contact me if she wants. Then she asked if I was going to get Emily a car, and I said no. I told her it's her responsibility because she's Emily's mother and needs to behave like it. Emily needs her to be a mom. Then I hung up and blocked her number. I expected that to be the end of it, at least for a while. But the next day my mom called, saying I should at least give Emily some money for a car if I won't buy her one. I said no and ended the call quickly to avoid a fight. Then I called my dad and explained everything, and he agreed with me. He said he'd talk to my mom and try to make her understand, but I suppose that didn't go well. Later that week, my dad asked if he could come over. When he arrived, he was truly upset. Apparently, my mom gave a big chunk of money from their retirement fund to my sister. This caused a huge fight between my parents, and my dad ended up packing a suitcase and staying at a motel for a bit. I felt awful. Here I am in my 40s, and I'm still causing problems between my parents. My dad insisted it wasn't my fault, that my mom made her choice, but I still felt responsible somehow. I offered for him to stay with us, but he said he needed some room to think. So now I'm no contact with my sister and mom, and low contact with my niece for now. My husband thinks we should just sever ties with everyone except my dad, but I'm not ready to fully write off my niece yet. She's young and still figuring things out, and it's not her fault she was born into this chaotic family. Thanks again for all the advice everyone offered me. It's helped me feel less irrational about this whole situation. Update 2. A lot has occurred since my last update, and not much of it good. About a week after my last post, I decided to speak with Emily again. I felt bad about how things concluded at the park, and I thought maybe we could find some common ground. I texted her asking if she wanted to meet, and she agreed, which surprised me. We met at my home this time while everyone else was out because I wanted us to speak privately. It was a rainy day, and I remember thinking the weather matched the mood, all gray and gloomy. When she arrived, she wouldn't look at me. She kept looking at the floor or her phone. I asked if I could offer her a hug, and she nodded. The moment I hugged her, she started crying and apologized for how she behaved. I told her she didn't need to apologize, that I understood she was disappointed and hurt. We sat in the living room with mugs of hot chocolate, and I asked her more about how her parents behave towards her. She mentioned her dad treats her kindly and attempts to spend time with her, but he's occupied working 2 jobs. He drives for Uber in the evenings after his day job, so he's rarely ever home. My sister's home more, but typically keeps to herself and dislikes being bothered. Emily said sometimes she'll go an entire day without truly speaking to either of them, even when they're all home. I asked if Emily felt neglected, and she responded no, but they don't have much family time because her parents argue frequently, especially about money. She mentioned sometimes her mom makes her feel like an obligation, but she knows they care for her. It's simply that they're always stressed about bills and rent and such. I inquired about the money my mom took from the retirement fund. Emily mentioned she and my sister were going car shopping soon. I was surprised my sister informed her about where the money originated, but I suppose she doesn't perceive anything wrong with taking from my parents' retirement. I didn't comment anything negative about it to Emily, however. That's between my sister and my parents. Then I raised the topic of her calling Luke her brother and asked if she truly feels that way about him. She admitted she views him as a cousin and simply thought playing the brother card would make me more inclined to help her. She clarified that even though they're biologically siblings, they've always been cousins to each other. I asked if she knew how I came to adopt Luke, and she said yes, her dad had told her the plain truth, while my sister had softened it. To be clear, Luke only views her as a cousin as well. To Luke, his only sibling is Justin. They're very close, always have been. Luke's protective over Justin, but also gives him a hard time like any older brother would. I felt like we were making headway, so I offered to pay for therapy for her. My husband agreed when I talked about it with him later, and she said she'd think about it. I also suggested we could have an enjoyable day out together on Saturdays. Just us, without Justin or Luke. She was excited by that idea, so that weekend we had our first outing. We went to a restaurant she'd been eager to try, one of those upscale places where they prepare the food right before you. It was costly, but seeing her smile was worthwhile. Then we went to a bookstore because she enjoys reading, and I purchased some books she'd been desiring. She seemed truly happy that day, and I thought maybe we had made a breakthrough. But then the next weekend, everything fell apart. Emily and I were meant to have our second outing, but I had to cancel because Justin was hospitalized. During football practice, he began wheezing and took his inhaler, but didn't wait long enough before carrying on. He's had asthma since he was young, but usually handles it well. This time, though, he was tackled hard, which knocked the wind out of him and caused a severe asthma attack. This occurred on a Friday, and Justin remained in the hospital until Sunday. It was terrifying. There was a point where his oxygen levels dropped quite low, and they were talking about putting him on a ventilator. Thankfully, it didn't come to that, but I hardly left his side the entire time. Emily and I were meant to go out Saturday. That morning, I called to cancel, but before I could explain why, she began yelling that I never cared about her, and ended the call. I was stunned, but also coping with my son in the hospital, so I lacked the energy to pursue her. I attempted to call back, but it went directly to voicemail. I texted that I was sorry, but Justin was in the hospital, and we could have our day the following weekend. Never received a reply from her. I stopped trying to contact her after a couple of days because I was focused on getting Justin back on his feet. Then arrived the moment that changed everything. 2 days ago, my family and I finally went out for dinner. Our first evening out since Justin returned home from the hospital. Approximately halfway through the meal, our neighbors called saying they'd contacted the police because someone was vandalizing one of our cars. When we arrived home, the police were present, and it was Justin's car. It had scratches all over it, dents where someone had struck the body with something hard, and spray paint saying, "Fuck you," and "spoiled brat" on the sides. 2 windows were shattered, and glass was strewn everywhere. Justin was heartbroken. Justin was heartbroken. He just stood there, gazing at his car, not uttering a word. We reviewed our security footage, Thank goodness for those cameras my husband insisted on putting in last year and could plainly see Emily and some girl I didn't know vandalizing the car. They were laughing and snapping photos of themselves doing it. The timestamp indicated they spent nearly 20 minutes wrecking the car before our neighbor noticed them and called the police. My husband provided a copy of the videos to the police, and Emily and her friend were apprehended the next morning. I didn't press for the arrest. That was entirely the police's decision once they viewed the footage. Moreover, why should Emily escape accountability for damaging someone else's property? What sort of lesson would that impart to her? My husband is firm that we don't attempt to have the charges dropped, and Justin and Luke concur with him. Justin worked diligently to contribute to that car, and now it's wrecked. Insurance will cover a portion of it, but likely not all, and our premiums will increase because of this. Beyond the emotional impact, Justin doesn't feel secure now, knowing his cousin would do something like this. I spoke with Luke about his thoughts on all of this. He's been quiet throughout most of the drama, but I wanted to check in with him since Emily is technically his half-sister. He mentioned he's done with everything and believes it's best to cease contact with everyone, including Emily, because she's just like her mom. He stated he's known for years that something isn't right with my sister, and he observes the same patterns in Emily now, so we're severing contact with everyone except for my dad. He's been supportive throughout all of this and concurs that Emily needs to face repercussions for her actions. My mom is still defending my sister and Emily, stating we provoked this by not assisting with the car in the first place. It's like being back at square one with my family, and I'm worn out. I'm unsure what will happen with the charges against Emily. She's 17, so she'll likely be charged as a minor, but it's still serious. My sister's threatening, so she'll likely be charged as a minor, but it's still serious. My sister's threatening to sue us for defamation or some nonsense, even though there's literal video evidence of what happened. But that's nothing compared to the next story. Essentially, I possess the right anatomical parts, but none of them function as they should. My uterus is unable to create a lining, meaning I can never become pregnant. On the upside, I have never experienced a period in my life, and I'm 32. My boyfriend's mother discovered this fact. I'm unsure how. She might have overheard a family member discussing it, as my family is aware, and I've also informed several of his relatives. After she learned of it and confronted me, she then prohibited her son from marrying me, stating I couldn't give him children. Needless to say, my boyfriend and I have talked about it, and although somewhat disappointed, we are perfectly okay with my inability to conceive. She is now instructing all her family members not to attend our upcoming wedding, as she doesn't want her son marrying someone defective who, in her opinion, cannot give him what he desires or requires. If she could eventually come around and alter her opinion on this, that would be wonderful. However, as things stand presently, I don't want her at the wedding, fearing she might do or say something to spoil the occasion. He for his part says that while he loves his mother, he is conflicted about whether to invite her. We might simply have a swift civil ceremony, inviting only a select few friends and relatives, and inform her afterward. Yet, she won't even visit when we ask her for dinner. I'm unsure what steps to take. I'm growing weary of her labeling me defective to everyone else. His father's fine with the situation, and his aunts and uncles are largely understanding. We've discussed adoption for the future, but she's also against it, arguing it wouldn't be his biological child, and therefore not truly her grandchild. I'm just venting here, so thanks for listening. Update 1. I've gotten 2 text messages today ahead of tonight's confrontation. One was positive, one negative. The good message came from my future father-in-law, who expressed his shock at his wife's actions, stating he loves me like the daughter he never had, and believes his son is lucky to have found me. The second was from his aunt, who largely echoed that sentiment, but also mentioned her sister, my future mother-in-law, had discussed everything with her, asked her not to attend the wedding, and then commented, "Why do I even have breasts? It's not like I'm going to use them for anything." I'm so nervous for tonight. My boyfriend asked me not to come, thinking my presence would make it worse. So, after work, I'll stay home, order pizza, and settle onto the couch to watch TV while petting my cat. That last part isn't a euphemism. I find much comfort playing with and petting my cat. Update 2. If you read my earlier post, I can't have children. My soon-to-be mother-in-law disliked this and did all she could to sabotage our future wedding, telling people not to attend and calling me defective. My future, no longer, husband and his father were to meet with her Tuesday evening to try and reason with her. Sadly, she won. I'm unsure what occurred or what was exchanged, but my boyfriend arrived home, and we had a significant argument. Despite our prior conversations, he then stated he desired children, and if I couldn't give them to him, the wedding was canceled. I essentially remarked that sounded like his mother, not him. He responded with, "I can speak for myself," and it quickly escalated into a lot of yelling between us. So I swiftly packed a bag and left for my parents' house for the night. The following day, I called in sick from work and mainly just gazed at the ceiling. We initially met when I was 30 years ago. Our relationship evolved from friendship to something more romantic. We dated throughout high school, attended college together, and then, after graduation, we moved in. I have never dated or been with anyone else, and to my knowledge, neither has he. We postponed marriage for so long because it wasn't crucial to us as long as we remained together. That changed when my father developed a terminal illness, and he voiced his desire to walk me down the aisle before he grew too unwell to do so. I'll be submitting my 2-month notice at work on Monday, allowing them time to locate a replacement and for me to train them before I move back to Germany. I neglected to mention that my father is German, my mother American. They initially met when she traveled there for employment. I was born there, lived there originally, and still have friends and family residing there. My friend, whom I had previously mentioned offered to be a surrogate, said I could stay in her spare room with her and her family until I settle in on my own there. Unfortunately, there's no happy ending to this story. The cruel mother-in-law won and succeeded in removing me from her son's life. In effect, she drove me out of the country. I realize I could relocate elsewhere in town or even within the state, but I don't wish to be alone here. There are too many memories, and I possess a strong support network overseas, so that's where I'm heading. I have been picked on so many times for so many things over the years, ranging from my height to my accent when I initially relocated here. That's gone now. I sound like any typical Midwestern girl. There have been other issues, but this particular one stings. I managed to cope with the others by reminding myself that's just who I am. If others dislike it, that's their concern. And I'm certain that in a few years, I'll feel the same about this predicament. But it's too soon now. Thanks for reading and your kind words of support. I apologize if this seems disorganized. I'm just venting and crying, making it difficult to maintain a clear line of thought. Update 3. Firstly, I want to thank you all for your support and thoughtful comments. 2 peculiar things occurred today, one of which I'm incredibly embarrassed about, and the other I simply found odd. Firstly, during my lunch break, I needed to quickly go to the grocery store to get a few items for my mom's dinner tonight. At the grocery store, who should I unexpectedly encounter but the woman who once could have been my mother-in-law? I'm unsure what to call her, so she will be Barbie. As I walked down an aisle, who should suddenly appear at the opposite end but Barbie? We exchanged a quick glance, then she instantly spun around and fled. I suppose she had nothing to say. The second event was my dad accompanying me to the house to assist with packing my belongings. He's already consented to serve as my representative when the house is sold, ensuring I receive my rightful portion. While we were there, he simply stood in the corner, glaring at my ex the entire time. Then my ex had this brilliant notion to ask for one last time, directly in front of my father. I believe I somewhat lost my temper. I grabbed my sweater. You can guess what part of me was right under it that I grabbed, and declared, "You are never going to see these. much less touch them or play with them again or anything else. He turned red and walked out the door, and my dad went from staring with a "You hurt my daughter, you're lucky to be alive" expression to simply bursting into laughter once the door closed behind my ex. He then remarked, "I can't believe you just did that," to which I responded, "Neither can I." We then headed home for dinner with my mom, and halfway through my mom inquired, "What does Vanessa's, the girl I'm moving in with in Germany, husband do again?" And I simply broke down. A perfectly honest inquiry. Yet I simply let everything out in loud, braying sobs. After some time, my dad approached and carried me upstairs to bed, just as he used to when I was 5, which is where I am currently typing this on my laptop. I asked him to tell Mom she did nothing wrong. I just needed to let it all out. And unfortunately for her, that was the moment. A coworker has already offered to take my cat, and my dad will keep things like my tennis trophies, yearbooks, and pictures upstairs at his house. He mentioned that even if I don't want those photos now, perhaps in about 5 years, I will. So he'll hold onto them until I'm prepared to retrieve them. Thanks again for all your kind words and support. I will provide updates when appropriate, and answer any additional questions if I can. Update 4. Well, I submitted my notice at work today, had a few more strange occurrences, and am now lying in bed with my laptop. First, while at lunch today, a dozen roses arrived with a note that simply stated, "I'm sorry. No more, no less." But I recognized the handwriting. I asked my coworker if she'd like them to give to her young daughter at home, and when she declined, saying, "I know why you received them, and I don't feel right accepting them," into the trash they went, along with the note. I had planned to wait until Monday to give notice, but the gossip mill had been working overtime for the past couple of days, so I went and informed my boss that I'm leaving, though I'll stay to help train a replacement. My last day is ironically Valentine's Day. What the hell? I have nothing else planned for that day. After that, I'll spend 2 weeks here bidding farewell to people, visiting some of my favorite places in town. Then, on February 29th, my parents will drive me to Chicago, roughly 4 hours away, and I depart for Munich on March 1st. My friend Vanessa resides in Munich, so I'll lodge at her home for a few days while I attempt to decide where to go and what to do. My hometown is approximately a 2.5-hour drive away, and I still have relatives there, so I'll decide between now and then which location to settle myself in. It's a small town with perhaps 40,000 residents. I'm unsure of the precise figure, but it does feature a castle and a sizable tin soldier museum. So I'm uncertain if I'll remain in Munich, offering more prospects, travel there and attempt to find work, or go somewhere else in Germany, like Hamburg or Berlin. I also visited the realtor handling the house sale and had to sign numerous documents, granting my father authorization to make any decisions concerning the sale. The lady remarked that it was no issue, as she has extensive experience with divorcing couples, and my only thought was that I was never even married. I returned home, and we ate dinner. Then my mother and I sat down, and she braided my hair. It has always been our custom to do this for our mother-daughter time. We did it for major events, not just for casual chats. When I first received my diagnosis, before the state tennis tournament, when I left for college, basically significant moments. I believe this qualifies as one of those. Then my ex's best friend called, mentioned he'd heard what occurred, remarked it was quite awful. He used harsher terms. However, children might be reading this, and he asked me to come over for an evening with his family before I left. I was closer friends with his wife than with him, but I'll attend nonetheless. Again, I cannot sufficiently thank this community for their support and supportive words. Sorry if I stray into unrelated subjects at times, but I simply type what comes to mind, and everything is progressing more quickly than I anticipated. Last week, I thought I might need to begin planning a wedding, and now I'm planning to leave the country and restart my life. My mother also proposed we visit the zoo in Chicago on my last day in America. I went there when we initially relocated to America. She believes it would serve as the ideal bookend to my entire 23-year residence in America. It feels like only yesterday when we relocated to a new home and a nice boy and his mother visited us, brought a basket of cookies, and greeted us to the neighborhood while I was out front, keeping my dogs separate from the movers. Times and people certainly do change. Update 5. Warning, there is an act of violence described here, and I'm still trembling from it. No, the main incident wasn't against me, depending on how you define violence. My ex came over to my parents' house tonight and said he wanted to talk. I had a good idea what he hoped would happen, but it definitely did not. We had a brief chat during which he said he was sorry, and I told him I was moving back home to Germany soon. He started to tear up, and so did I. I take responsibility for giving him the opening that was about to occur. We're both crying, and we start hugging. As we're hugging, I don't notice one of his hands moving down my back to my backside until he gets a good handful of buttock and squeezes it. As soon as it registered in my brain what he was doing, I stepped back and unleashed my 6'1", 155 pounds, and 25-plus years of developing a strong tennis forehand, and simply slapped him across the face. My hand still stings from the force of it. He staggered back, and I just pointed to the door and yelled for him to get out, though I may have added some naughty words with it. He looked shocked at me, hung his head, and just walked out the door. After I heard him get in his car, start it, and drive off, I broke down in tears. My father, who had been waiting and listening outside the room the entire time, he later explained it as listening to see if I needed backup, came into the room to me crying even more at this point, and he started to give me a big hug. A couple of minutes later, while he's holding me, I thought that he might reach down and squeeze the other's cheek. That thought sent me into hysterical laughter. We stood there holding each other while I was alternating between laughing and crying. My mother came downstairs and fixes us all something to drink. A few minutes later, my phone rang, and according to caller ID, it was Barbie, my ex's mother, and the one who started this all. Now, I did not hear her side of the conversation, so anything attributed to her is what my father told me later. She basically said she was going to call the cops on me for assaulting her son, and my father said it was justifiable self-defense. My ex attacked me first. The ass squeeze, and we have cameras to show the whole thing to the cops. Should they show up, we don't. But she doesn't need to know that. She hung up, and I haven't seen a cop since, so I don't know if she was bluffing or my dad's threats scared her off. Now I will admit that I miss the physical part of our relationship, and he was my first and only at many things. First date, first kiss, first sex, etc. But none of that outweighs the hurt he and his mother caused me. I would rather go celibate for life rather than let him touch me again. I shouldn't have let him hug me in the first place, but it was a weak moment, and I know not to let him do that again. Again, thank you for reading and the kind words of support. I thought I wasn't going to update again after the last one, and yet something else happened. Hopefully, unless it's a reply to something written here or a message, you won't hear from me again until I'm in Germany and clear of this situation. It's late now, and I'm heading to bed. Update 6. Throughout this entire ordeal, 2 puzzling matters had no answer for me. 1. Why did he abruptly change his mind? And 2. How did Barbie, his mother, discover this? It wasn't widely known, nor did I inform her. I had my suspicions about how, and yesterday they were confirmed. I was downtown during my lunch break. I've been training the new girl who's replacing me. She seems genuinely nice and capable. I would have liked to work with her if the circumstances were different. At lunch, I encountered Steve, his friend and neighbor, who he's known since he was 3, or 6 years premia. He mentioned he had heard about us. He remarked it was a pity that we had separated and inquired if it had any connection to my infertility. Now, I hadn't informed Steve. He wasn't a close enough friend to confide in, so I asked what he knew regarding my infertility. He then recounted the entire story. This is from his perspective, and I'm merely relaying what he stated, so it may not be entirely accurate. Steve and Jack, my ex, were working on Steve's car. I don't know what make it is, only that it's from the 60s. I'm not a car person, never have been. Four wheels, an engine, and a decent stereo system are all I need to know. If you were to ask me what make, I would say it's blue and old, nothing further. Hopefully, unless it's a reply to something written here or a message, you won't hear from me again until I'm in Germany and clear of this situation. It's late now, and I'm heading to bed. Update 6. Throughout this entire ordeal, two puzzling matters had no answer for me. One, why did he abruptly change his mind? And two, how did Barbie, his mother, discover this? It wasn't widely known, nor did I inform her. I had my suspicions about how, and yesterday they were confirmed. I was downtown during my lunch break. I've been training the new girl who's replacing me. She seems genuinely nice and capable. I would have liked to work with her if the circumstances were different. At lunch, I encountered Steve, his friend and neighbor, who he's known since he was 3 or 6 years, Premia. He mentioned he had heard about us. He remarked it was a pity that we had separated and inquired if it had any connection to my infertility. Now, I hadn't informed Steve. He wasn't a close enough friend to confide in, so I asked what he knew regarding my infertility. He then recounted the entire story. This is from his perspective, and I'm merely relaying what he stated, so it may not be entirely accurate. Steve and Jack, my ex, were working on Steve's car. I don't know what make it is, only that it's from the 60s. I'm not a car person, never have been. 4 wheels, an engine, and a decent stereo system are all I need to know. If you were to ask me what make, I would say it's blue and old, nothing further. Now, before this, we had a very informal proposal. What do you want on your toast? It looks like it's going to rain today. Should we get married? So they went to Jack's parents' house. He wanted an antique heirloom ring that had been in his family for centuries and wanted to make a formal proposal. He asked where it was and why he wanted it, and his mother ran upstairs, crying with joy to find it. When she came back down with it, she was crying and said it would be nice to have the pitter-patter of tiny feet around the house, and asked if I was currently pregnant. It seemed odd to her, I suppose, that we were getting married after 16 years of dating/living together, so she thought maybe he had knocked me up, and that's why the proposal after so many years. He said we already had the pitter-patter of tiny feet in Babette, my cat. She said, "No, I mean a baby, silly." And he responded that I can't have babies, and then proceeded to tell her my entire medical situation. She said something like, "This isn't going to happen," went back upstairs, returned the ring, and slammed the door. The next day is when she forbade me from marrying him, started calling me defective, and initiated this entire narrative. After telling me this account, I told Steve that yes, that is a contributing factor in our breakup. He remarked, "What a shame. You two made a great couple," and Jack was probably devastated. I then said goodbye and went on to lunch, and when I arrived home later that day, I went to my room and cried into my pillow before my father came up to get me for dinner. I had always suspected that he told her somehow, and while it's not a major state secret, it's not something I have ever felt comfortable telling people. Now that I am sharing this story on this site, I have no problem saying my parts don't work to complete strangers, and it's been comforting. Thank you all for your support. Update 7, a 2-part update. We'll begin with the good news first. I departed America on March 1st and flew to Munich. I sat next to an elderly lady who was terrified of flying, but was going to visit her son and his family. I don't recall what he did or why he was in Germany, so for the 10 or so hours we were in the air, she held my arm in a death grip, and any time we hit an air pocket or shook around a little, it was a relatively smooth flight with just a few bumps here and there. She gripped even tighter, and later I discovered I had a bruise, but fortunately her nails didn't dig in. After deplaning and going through customs, she met up with her son and his family. This happened before all the quarantine and isolation truly started, so not much of a problem there. Then all the fun began with the quarantine, and I've spent most of my time at my friend's house, tutoring her kids in English and generally helping out around the house. I had 3 interviews arranged before I arrived here, but they were all canceled. My uncle up in Kulmbach has offered to drive the 3 hours down and bring me back up there, but I haven't made a decision yet. The negative news. Apparently Jack, my ex, has been struggling with this. Ordinarily, when my family and I flew back to Germany in the past, we departed from Cedar Rapids, went up to Chicago or Minneapolis, then continued on to Germany. Apparently, from what a friend informed me, he drove out to the Cedar Rapids airport, unaware that we had driven up to Chicago, and I flew directly from there. When I didn't appear there, he went home and concluded he had gotten the time/date incorrect. He sent several letters to my house. I had my mother open and read one to me on the phone, but soon stopped her. Even though my mother and I have been candid about my sex life, there were details in that letter I didn't feel comfortable hearing or having her hear. The letters ceased when he lost his employment for reasons unrelated to quarantine and later ended up in jail. No one has been able to tell me precisely what transpired, but the best guess from what I've been informed is that one night he got into a shouting match with his mother, which became physical, and his dad had to peel him off her until the cops showed up and arrested him. So I guess things got bad enough that a neighbor called the cops. I never would have expected this from him with anybody, much less his mom. If only he could have fought this hard for me way back when, things might be different. So, as of this update, I'm sitting around with not much to do, but at least I'm not in jail. Sorry for any errors. I loaned my laptop to my friend's son, and it hasn't worked properly since, though he claims he did nothing bad to it. He's a good kid, so I believe him that it was probably just an accident. Hope everyone is staying safe and doing as well as can be during this time. Auf Wiedersehen. Mia, update 8. I actually spoke to him yesterday on the phone. The last time I updated, he had been arrested and thrown in jail for assaulting his mother. I don't know if he's out on bail or there were no charges or what, but he has spent the last few days sitting in my parents' front yard, doing nothing but sitting. My dad said he was going to go out there and kick his ass, but my mom, who's definitely the cooler-headed of the two, went out there and calmly told him I was gone, and he should pick up and start his life over too. She called me and told me this, so I decided to call him, which I did last night. He answered and sounded kind of relieved it was me, but also sad. J equals Jack, my ex, M equals me, or Mia, either one works. This is the conversation as best as I recall it. Hello, M. Hello, I gather you're out in my parents' front yard. Well, I'm not there, so please leave them be. I was hoping the rumors I heard weren't true, that you were still here and we could talk. M, I tried talking before and you just took it as a chance to grab my ass and act as though sex could solve this whole thing. J, I'm sorry. I've never ended a relationship before, so I'm not sure how to handle it. M, I've never ended a relationship before either, but I think I've handled it better. I just need to know. Why? J, I have to do what my mother says, and she wasn't pleased when she found out you couldn't have children. M, you're 32. I don't think you need to do what your mother says anymore. J, you just don't understand. M, I do understand. We had discussed the problem before and had come up with solutions which apparently aren't satisfactory to her. So you discarded our relationship. Did it mean that little to you? You didn't need to go away. When are you coming back? Not for a couple of years. Once this whole pandemic situation is over, I can hopefully find a job and my own place to stay. Come back, please. I'm sorry, but you made your choice. Barbie, his mother, or me. I hope the two of you are quite content together. Throughout all of this, he is crying, and I'm doing my best not to. Jay, please come back. We can get married and adopt, or whatever. I'm sorry. We can find a way to resolve this. M, I told you there were always other options, but you discarded those along with me. Moreover, Barbie's going around calling me flawed, and she won't accept us adopting. How does that change? Jay, you're not flawed. I'm sorry, but I can't control what she believes. M, no, but you support what she believes. You've known this about me since we were 16. Suddenly it's a problem. Jay, I don't like her calling you flawed. In case you hadn't heard, I just spent time in jail because I defended you. M, maybe if you had done that when this all began, I'd still be there. I think that broke him, because he kept softly whispering sorry repeatedly and then hung up. I just lay on the bed and quietly cried until Victoria, my friend's oldest child, softly knocked and told me it was time for dinner. Sorry for the formatting, still trying to get accustomed to how Reddit works. Also sorry if I came across as a bitch in this, but when someone discards a relationship that goes back to childhood, I can be a bit upset. Hope everyone is staying safe through this whole pandemic situation, and hopefully, when it's all over, I can move on with my life here in Germany. Update 9. So I moved out of my friend Vanessa's this weekend. Germany. Update 9. So I moved out of my friend Vanessa's this weekend. Her family was incredibly kind in taking me in, but when we first planned this, it was pre-virus, and I thought I'd have my own place and a job and everything. My uncle said he would drive down and pick me up, and I felt better accepting his offer than remaining down there. So he came down Saturday, spent the night with some friends of his, and we drove back up to Kölnbach on Sunday, where I am currently staying with him and his wife and typing this before bed. It's odd being here, considering I was born here and lived my first 9 years here. But even when I've been here on vacation in the past, it never felt as peculiar just being here. I don't know if it's the feeling of the town being empty, or my present personal situation, it just doesn't feel quite right. Anyway, that's enough of random rambling. I'm just trying to avoid typing the real part of this story, if you couldn't discern. Friday night, Jack, my ex, called me. I still have the same phone and the same account back in Iowa, so when it rang with his unique ringtone, it took me by surprise. I picked it up and said, "What do you want?" Which I know was a little rude, and I apologized to him for it as soon as he said, "I just wanted to see how you were doing and say hi." So we then had a pleasant conversation when I could hear shrieking and a, "Is that her?" Then he said, "I'm talking. Leave me alone." When she, Barbie, his mother who started all this, got on and said, "Leave my son alone. Haven't you done enough damage?" To which I responded by just hanging up. She must have taken his phone and tried calling me several more times, none of which I answered. But when I checked voicemails later, she was ranting about how I ruined his life, how he had lost his job, which we already knew was going to happen last year when his company's owner announced his retirement and was selling off the assets. But he gave a year's notice and even helped some employees find work elsewhere. He had lost his house. We sold our house after our split. He had been caught drinking in public. I suppose he bought a few bottles, went down by the lake and drank in the park, and got caught by the police for it. I'd heard that from another friend earlier and how he had assaulted her, mentioned before, but I secretly hoped he would abduct her good before his dad intervened. She even got to use her favorite word, defective, saying that secretly hoped he would abduct her good before his dad intervened. She even got to use her favorite word, defective, stating that if she had known 16 years ago that I was defective, she would have found her son a nice, normal girl to be with. She also mentioned that Jack had recently discussed suicide, stating there's no reason to continue. I tried calling back, but each time, she picked up the phone and continued screaming, so I stopped trying and simply wrote him a letter, which I sent to my parents for them to deliver to his house, assuming Barbie would just see it was from me and intercept it if I sent it directly to him. I told him that I still loved him and wished him well in life and to move on, but that our relationship was over. So here I am 5,000 miles away, with civilization shut down, living with my aunt and uncle, and just waiting for when I can rebuild my life. Thank you for reading, and apologies for any formatting errors. I think I'll put away my laptop now and head to sleep. Now, this next one will really shock you. Hello, Reddit. I'm currently in a really complex situation, and any kind of help or guidance would be much appreciated. My husband Jeremy, 35M, and I, 32F, have been a couple for 5 years, and married for 2. We met through work, so I didn't know much about his past, but eventually, after dating for a while, we discovered that both of us had only had one serious relationship after graduating college. My ex and I had been together for 4 years, 3 years during college and 1 year afterward. But then we broke up due to personal differences and didn't stay in touch. We had been apart for almost 5 years when I met Jeremy. However, he was still in contact with his ex when we started dating and was actually quite good friends with her. His ex, let's call her Valerie, was his high school sweetheart. They had been together since they were 16, all through college, and they had been apart for 5 years when he met me. He told me that apparently they had to separate because she wanted to advance her career, which meant she'd have to take a job in Australia, and he didn't want a long-distance relationship. They tried to make it work for a few months, but afterward they mutually agreed to go their separate ways, as that would be for the best. They were part of the same social circle, so they continued to stay in touch and remained friends. I was fine with it until I met his group of friends for the first time, after almost 9 months of dating. All of them gathered for dinner on New Year's Eve, and he chose to bring me along so he could introduce me to his friend group. Valerie was also there, which caught me off guard since I hadn't been ready to see her. I had only heard about her from Jeremy, and he'd only said kind things. So at first, I wasn't insecure or anything. But then, as soon as I began interacting with her, I realized her demeanor towards me was completely different from what I'd anticipated. Jeremy had made her seem truly warm and relaxed, but I didn't find her to be that way at all. She made some truly sharp remarks about me in front of everyone present, and they all just laughed it off, apparently because that was her sense of humor, but I didn't like it at all. I don't think anyone understood because she disguised what she said as jokes, like her remark that it was surprising to see me in person because I looked different in pictures, and now that she'd seen me, she wasn't sure if I was Jeremy's type since he mostly preferred tall blondes, and I was neither, but she was. And everyone laughed, thinking she was just joking. She also made some comments about how I was her successor, so she felt she owed it to me to give me some guidance on how to keep Jeremy happy. These were still mild comments, and I was prepared to overlook them because perhaps she wasn't trying to single me out, but maybe she actually did possess a very unusual sense of humor, as everyone claimed. But then while we were drinking, she raised a toast to the fact that Jeremy had at last moved on, and how happy she was for him. I found that pleasant until she mentioned that if it hadn't been for her choice to move to Australia, I likely wouldn't even be there with them. Fortunately, no one laughed at that, as it was rather awkward, but she promptly began laughing at her own odd comment, and everyone felt compelled to chuckle so we could simply move on. It was clear to me that she was still somewhat possessive of Jeremy, and when we returned home that day, I informed him that I didn't want her speaking to me again if he wished to remain with me. I explained that I wasn't comfortable with his friendship with her, as she was clearly still not over him. And also, she had been utterly rude to me the whole time we were together. I had tolerated her respectfully once. I wasn't going to do that again. And I was very precise about my boundaries because even in my past relationships, I've had to contend with situations like this. Fortunately, Jeremy seemed to understand my perspective. He told me that he too had found her behavior very strange and had decided he would need to remove her from his life because he didn't want Valerie causing problems in our relationship. So that was settled. He informed me he had blocked her, and I was satisfied with that explanation. After that incident, I never heard him bring up Valerie or speak with her again. I saw his friends multiple times afterward, and they never mentioned Valerie to me either, likely because Jeremy had told them I disliked her, and things had been progressing well until last week. Now, I've actually been pregnant, and my due date was last Sunday. It's currently Thursday, and Jeremy left to go to Valerie because she had an emergency and required him to be with her. So he departed 2 days prior to my due date and returned last night. We also had a huge argument about it because I had presumed he had blocked Valerie everywhere and hadn't stayed in contact with her, but he told me he had, in fact, done those things, yet she had used an alternative number to reach him and was quite desperate. Apparently, she had been diagnosed with stage 2 brain cancer, and she truly needed someone to be there for her. I was furious with him because there was no way I could accept that he was willing to abandon me when I was so heavily pregnant. And honestly, Valerie had just received her diagnosis, and I could grasp that it was hard for him to process. Someone he once cared for deeply might not survive, but it wasn't as if she would pass away the very next day. He could have gone after he had at least supported me through labor, witnessed his child's birth, but the moment he got this news, he felt he had to leave right away. I tried to explain to him that it was absurd he was even thinking of leaving me alone in my current state, but he assured me he'd be back before I went into labor, and that due dates aren't precise, so I might still have another week or so. And he instructed me to just manage until he returned, then left for the airport that same day without even bothering to complete our conversation. He was fully conscious of the fact that my family wasn't here. My parents resided in Iowa, and I was entirely dependent on him. After he departed for the airport, I tried calling him multiple times, but his phone was turned off. I was truly distressed and desperate, so I called my mother-in-law instead, as she has always been kind to me. And as soon as I tearfully explained the situation to her, she came right over and began trying to call him too, but naturally his phone was off. She comforted me and stayed with me all that day because I was very upset and just kept weeping continuously, as the pregnancy hormones were also affecting my emotions. We couldn't contact Jeremy until the following day, and even then, when we called him, he didn't respond, and only sent us both a text message stating he'd return soon enough, and hopefully before the baby's birth. He apologized for doing this to me and mentioned he would accept any consequence I deemed appropriate for him when he came back. But for the time being, he simply had to support an old friend because she also had no family in Australia, and her parents couldn't fly out to visit her, as her dad was also very ill. So she was really relying on him to be there for her, to at least help her cope with this, and he simply had to be there. That explanation didn't satisfy me, and it only angered me even further that he believed it was more crucial to support an old friend because he considered a cancer diagnosis an emergency, while he was neglecting someone he truly should have been there for, his wife. And I don't think a cancer diagnosis is any more urgent than a literal pregnancy, because what was he going to do about it? Cure her instantly? No, correct? So he should have simply stayed here with me. My mother-in-law was feeling similarly, and when he sent me that message, she asked me quite directly if I wanted to leave him, and I didn't hesitate. I just said yes. So she spoke to her lawyer and had him prepare divorce papers for me, along with an agreement to terminate Jeremy's parental rights. She informed me that if he returned by the due date, I was free to decide whether I wanted to file for divorce and conclude this, or prefer to speak with him and then clarify things before taking any action. And if he couldn't make it back, then it was quite clear what I needed to do. She had raised Jeremy alone and had been a single parent, so I could see why she was so insistent on this. She even assured me that she would ensure Jeremy paid child support, unlike his father, who had never even bothered to meet Jeremy after his birth and had left his mother entirely alone to raise him. She pledged that I wouldn't experience the same situation as she did and supported me all through this week. For the next few days, neither of us reached out to Jeremy, and on Monday I began labor. Then my mother-in-law attempted to call him to at least inform him I was giving birth, but even then he didn't answer, and she chose not to text him about it because there was no use. My parents had arrived the day before, which was fortunate, and they were all there for me. Even so, I keenly felt Jeremy's absence that day, and I decided that no matter what occurred when he came back, I would not ever view him in the same light. So I completed the divorce papers and told my lawyer to file them on my behalf so I could initiate the process without delay. I did that just 3 hours after giving birth and was hardly able to lift a pen but a single glance at my daughter showed me that if I wanted to be happy and be a good mother to her, I had to prioritize my own well-being first, and I couldn't achieve that while remaining with a man who had made it evident he valued his duties to Valerie over me. Following our daughter's birth, I didn't contact him at all, and my mother-in-law, my parents, and I were all staying together at home. My parents are due to leave tomorrow, though, so afterward it will just be my mother-in-law and me. I informed them all of my decision to end things with him, because he hadn't even attempted to contact me, despite promising me he would be back before the due date, and he had still spent a week with Valerie. He returned home quite late last night. I opened the door for him, and he immediately embraced me, but I pushed him away and declared I wanted nothing to do with him. Then, hearing the doorbell ring and the door already open, my mother-in-law entered the room with the papers and literally tossed them at her son's face, stating she wanted him to leave that very instant. She declared she didn't care where he spent the night, but she simply wanted him out of the house because I currently needed peace and quiet, having given birth a couple of days prior, and he hadn't even been present for it. She also informed him that I had already completed the divorce paperwork, and she required him to complete the paperwork to terminate his parental rights over our daughter. He was stunned and couldn't utter a word for the first couple of minutes, and I chose to leave the room as quickly as possible because my mother-in-law was correct. I was still quite weak and needed time to physically recover, so I moved to another room because I truly did not want to speak with Jeremy, and seeing him had considerably weakened my resolve. I didn't want this to become any harder for me. Then I heard yelling, and I realized Jeremy had begun arguing with his mother, but I chose not to intervene and remained out of it with my daughter. After a few minutes, I began to hear Jeremy calling my name, demanding that I speak to him and at least let him see his daughter because I owed that to him. That bothered me, and I returned outside to face him once I had put my daughter in her crib, and I informed him that given his actions, I owed him nothing whatsoever. He had deliberately decided not to support me, despite knowing my due date was close, and he had opted not to attend his child's birth. He had abandoned me completely, and I was simply fortunate that my mother-in-law was present for me. Therefore, I owed him nothing at all. And I told him I didn't care at that moment. Our daughter was sleeping, and I didn't want to disturb her. So I wanted him to leave, and we could talk about this later in the morning. He eventually departed, but I could tell he had tears in his eyes as he left. He even attempted to speak with me one final time, but I stepped back from him and informed him I wanted him gone. We were quite exhausted, so we retired for the night, but this morning he reappeared, and I finally informed him it was over for me. It had been finished the exact moment he left to be with Valerie, and nothing he could say would make me reconsider. My mother-in-law was in the room with us, but I had informed her I wanted to have this conversation with him personally and resolve it definitively. He then began literally crying and pleading, and my mother-in-law needed to exit the house with the baby so our daughter wouldn't have to hear any of it, as he was quite loud. He continued to claim he had only left because Valerie had been pleading with him, asserting she was dying, and he had remained there for a week as she had no family and felt very alone. He had spent that entire week attempting to console her and offer support, claiming it was entirely platonic, but I wasn't there. So who can say what truly transpired? So I told him it no longer mattered, and I demanded he depart. But then he said that even if I had decided to divorce him, he thought it was too severe a penalty to actually strip him of his opportunity to be a father. So he wanted me to rethink that decision. Otherwise, he would pursue custody. And even then, it would be highly improbable he would gain custody of his daughter because, for one, he was absent for the birth, which could be held against him, and he knew it. Furthermore, she was a brand new baby, so she required me far more than she needed her father. So he was pleading for a single opportunity because despite everything that had happened, he truly desired a family. He eventually departed, but he urged me to consider it, and now I'm uncertain what steps to take. This is a significant matter, and it affects people's lives, so I simply want to be certain of my actions before proceeding. So, am I wrong for divorcing my husband and asking him to terminate his parental rights over our daughter because he missed the birth of our child to be with his ex, who had claimed to be dying? Update 1. I have made up my mind and I am proceeding with the divorce, but I am still considering whether I want full custody or not. 4 days have passed since I made the post, and Jeremy has appeared at the house every single day to apologize to me and literally plead for forgiveness. And each day I have found it more difficult to turn him away. But I know I must do it. Thankfully, my mother-in-law has been with me at every stage and is also assisting with the baby's care. My parents had to fly back home 2 days after I gave birth, and she has been gracious enough to leave her own home and move in here with me on a longer-term basis, because she knows I will need all the help I can get. And I've told her that even if I choose not to give Jeremy full custody, or even shared custody, she will still have every right to visit her granddaughter whenever she desires. I've even asked her what she thinks I should do about the entire custody matter, but she has left that decision to me and told me that she knows I will make the correct choice for both of us, just as I made the right decision with the divorce. But I am still struggling to come to a decision. It isn't becoming any simpler for me because Jeremy continues to appear daily, and each time he arrives, I simply feel like accepting him back and pardoning him for everything. However, I know I cannot do that, particularly after all I've experienced, because Valerie has consistently been a sensitive issue for me, and he disregarded that even when I was carrying his child. Truthfully, I don't even know if they've maintained contact, or if there was nothing developing between them over the last few months, as I simply cannot bring myself to believe anything he says any longer. Thus far, his apologies have all been identical. He merely keeps reiterating what he told me the first time he returned home after his visit with Valerie. Nothing occurred, it was entirely platonic, and he was simply there to look after her, because she had asserted she was dying, and as her friend, he felt compelled to be there. Each and every time, I must repeat the same things back to him. It no longer matters because I have made my decision, and I am going to depart from him. It's truly sad now, but that's simply the reality. Update too high. Thus, a few days ago, I had shared an update stating that I had resolved to proceed with a divorce, but I still couldn't decide if I wanted to pursue full custody of my daughter or not. However, I believe now I know what actions to take. For almost 5 consecutive days, Jeremy had appeared daily, without fail, to apologize for his actions and attempt to win me back. But after that, he abruptly ceased appearing. I found it odd, but at least I felt relieved, thinking I wouldn't have to contend with him any longer and could think clearly. However, I don't believe that will be possible now, because after he stopped appearing, other individuals began texting me, asserting that my actions were incredibly wrong and unethical, and they had never anticipated me behaving in such a manner. Immediately afterward, his friends started inundating me with texts. I'm not merely referring to his usual group, but every single person who attended school or college with him, and I suspect he created a template for them to send to me as if this were some petition or something, where he could simply write emails and messages to the mayor to get whatever is happening canceled, because he disagrees with it. Anyway, initially I was blocking people indiscriminately, but then they began creating fake accounts to text me the same messages repeatedly, and there's a limit to how many individuals you can block. What's more, it's not only that I'm dealing with all this emotional pain and trying to sort out what's happening to me, I'm also still worn out from giving birth and trying to be there for my newborn daughter, too. So it's all really draining, and this is the very last thing I needed. And if he truly cared about me, he wouldn't be making me go through all of this at such a sensitive time in my life. It's quite clear he cares about no one but himself, so I don't think I need to stress about what I'll do regarding my daughter's custody anymore. I'm going to file for full custody, and that's that. Of course, he still has the papers and can sign his rights away. If he doesn't choose to do that, I've spoken to my lawyer, and this is moving forward. The messages I've been getting so far aren't pleasant, and I know for a fact that he wrote the template message and told his friends to send it to me. It truly shows what he thinks more than anything else, and if this is what he thinks about me, I don't believe we need to be together at all. The reason I'm so upset is because the messages contain this line: "We never expected you to be the kind of person who would use their child as a pawn to punish their partner and play mind games like this." Seriously, is he for real? Does he genuinely think I'm using our daughter to punish him for what he did? I don't think he understands how marriages or children operate, because if he did, he never would have said this. And that in particular truly hurt me and helped me come to a decision. When I showed those messages to my mother-in-law, she was also quite angry and said she was going to get in touch with him and scold him. But I asked her not to, since it just wasn't worth the trouble. If we attempted to confront him about it, he would simply deny any involvement, even though it was quite evident that all of his friends were sending me the same sort of messages, and he had to be the one instigating it. To be frank, I don't even comprehend why he felt the need to include his friends in all of this, because it's not as if I'm going to see and read their messages and immediately cease what I'm doing. Their opinions literally make no difference to me whatsoever, because they are not my friends. I have never been close to any of them, so they can think whatever they wish about me, and I'm not going to mind. I suppose he just imagined that if an enormous number of people began texting me about this, then I would simply yield to the pressure or something. But then I'm concerned that he doesn't truly know me whatsoever, because I'm not the type of person who's going to yield to pressure. I didn't even change my mind when he himself was appearing daily and pleading for my forgiveness, because I knew that allowing him back into my life wouldn't be good for either of us, and certainly not good for our daughter. I might have felt awful about it, but I still followed through because I don't give in easily, and after being with me for such a long time, I believe he should have some idea of the kind of person I am. But it's quite obvious that he doesn't, and it's becoming more and more apparent to me daily that I am making the right choice by deciding to leave him. So not only his friends, but even if every single person he knows begins texting me about this, I'm still not going to alter my decision. In fact, this action of his has only made me feel more convinced about what I'm doing, and I know that as long as the people I love are supporting me, I don't need to worry about any of this. Update 3. Hey, so the legal process for the divorce and the custody agreement will begin in a couple of days, and Jeremy has chosen not to contest the divorce, but he is requesting at least partial custody of his daughter. We're going to see how that turns out, since I'm open to the concept because I'm not an inherently bad person, but I don't think I want to start sharing custody until our daughter is at least a couple of years old. So that's what we will negotiate, and I'm very glad I've made this choice for myself. Now that it's finally happening, and it's sinking in how real all of this is, I imagined I would be frightened, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I think some of this could also be due to a message I got from Valerie yesterday, where she told me she truly didn't want to break up a home, but she genuinely needed someone by her side, and as her parents wouldn't be there for her, Jeremy was the sole other person she could consider. She also mentioned that over the last few years she had attempted to reach him numerous times, and he had consistently rejected her, claiming I wouldn't approve of it. But she knew that her oldest friend in the world would always support her, particularly if she was unwell, which is why she had reached out to him. And she was regretful it had caused so much difficulty in my marriage. But she believes I should allow him to keep his individuality instead of being so controlling. So I was correct that he hadn't blocked her whatsoever, and they had actually kept in contact, perhaps not in the manner I imagined, but they did at least communicate. The most difficult part was that she also shared with me that they had a moment when they were together, and they had wound up kissing for a few minutes, but after that, Jeremy had pulled back from her, stating that he couldn't do this, particularly while his wife was with his child. She mentioned that he hadn't allowed the kiss to go on for more than a couple of minutes, claiming that's how loyal he was to me, as if that was meant to change anything. It was absurd. But yes, I had been correct about everything. So now securing the divorce and custody on my terms ought to be very easy, given that I'm aware of these facts. I've talked to my lawyer, and we've also adjusted our petition to ask for a bit more of everything, because now I feel I'm entitled to it, seeing as I've clearly been cheated on. Anyway, I'm feeling quite confident about what I'm doing, and I know that things will turn out well. I'll keep you all updated on whatever happens next. Thank you so much for joining me here. This next one will make your jaw drop. I'm leaving Mike tomorrow. I'm so damn tired of taking nonsense from his family, while he won't lift a finger to at least stand up for me. I'm looking for some advice on whether I'm handling this the right way, or if I'm just being a massive bit H about everything. For context, we've been dating for about 3 years and living together for over a year. We met at a friend's birthday party, where he spilled his drink on me, then insisted on buying me another one as an apology. He was charming and funny, and we hit it off right away. I always thought we were solid until his family started showing their true colors, and he showed me exactly where I stand in his priorities. His sister has this powerful personality that she has used in every way possible to destroy her own marriages. I'll refer to her as Darla, F-37. She's articulate, learned a trade, and is very outspoken. She could be out there earning a living, but she chose to be a stay-at-home mom, no job, fighting her ex for child support, and using her sharp tongue to insult people. Every family gathering feels like walking through a minefield with her. One wrong word and boom, you're the enemy for life. She has 2 kids, both under 10, who she uses as excuses for everything. Can't work because of the kids. Can't clean her house because of the kids. Can't be on time because of the kids. Yet somehow she has time to start drama on Facebook and get into fights with random people online. She's always posting vague messages about fake people and knowing who your real friends are, but never actually says who she's talking about. She complains about being low on cash, but turns away job opportunities that come her way. I've seen people literally offer her jobs, and she finds some excuse why it won't work. Like Mike's uncle once offered her a receptionist position at his dental office with flexible hours and good pay, and she said no because she isn't comfortable in medical environments, whatever that means. You can't say anything without worrying that she will think it's about her, and she doesn't respect other people's opinions. She's the type to make everything about herself. Like if someone mentions they're tired, she'll interject with how she hasn't slept in days because of her kids. For example, she had a significant crisis a while back when her ex left her. She was triggered and swung from tears to rage, sometimes in the same conversation. It was actually somewhat frightening to watch. No one knew what to say to her without setting her off. She'd be sobbing 1 minute about how much she missed him, then screaming the next about what a jerk he was and how she never wanted to see him again. The whole family was walking on eggshells around her. I remember this one dinner where she showed up already in a mood. Mike's mom had made this big meal and invited everyone over to try to cheer Darla up. But Darla grumbled that the food was too spicy. It wasn't. That the music was causing her a headache. It was hardly audible, and that everyone was looking at her. No one was. Then Mike's dad cracked a joke about the neighbor's new car compensating for something, and Darla burst into tears, claiming everyone was making fun of her ex. It was exhausting. Their mom asked me for advice on what to do because they were considering sending her to a mental clinic. But Darla refused. I said maybe she could use a distraction to help alleviate her pain. I suggested maybe getting a part-time job could help her feel like herself again, and if she liked it, it would help distract her from what was happening. I thought I was being helpful. The whole family was worried about her and unsure what to do. At the time, his mom seemed to value my input. She nodded and said, "That's not a bad idea. Something to get her out of the house." We vended and said, "That's not a bad idea. Something to get her out of the house." We even talked about particular places that might be hiring. I actually thought his mom and I were connecting over this mutual concern for Darla. Days later, Darla concluded that I was the enemy, that I had insulted her, and that I suggested she was unstable, and that the cause of her mental breakdown was her unemployment. Those were Mike's exact words when he came to talk to me about it. She began telling the whole family that I thought she was lazy and unstable. She totally distorted my words. She also decided I shouldn't speak to their youngest brother, Tim, M30, and I became her enemy and lost Tim all in the same week. Tim and I were actually very close friends. He's the most normal one in the family, and we could chat for hours about random things. His wife Sarah and I also got along wonderfully. We'd text each other memes and sometimes go shopping together. His wife was nearly always included in our interactions, too. We'd have them over for dinner or meet up for drinks. It wasn't anything strange or improper, but suddenly Mike tells me that Tim and I shouldn't speak so much because it was odd. What on earth does that even mean? The whole situation left me feeling embarrassed, as if I'd done something wrong when I absolutely hadn't. I remember asking Mike directly, "Do you think something improper is happening between me and Tim?" And he had the nerve to say, "Well, you two are awfully close," as if being friends with your boyfriend's brother is some sort of crime. I reminded him that Sarah was usually there too, and he just shrugged and said, "Darla thinks it's strange, and I kind of agree." After that, Tim stopped replying to my texts. Sarah unfollowed me on Instagram. It hurt a great deal, especially since I thought we were genuine friends. I later found out that Darla had told them I was talking trash about their marriage behind their backs. Total fabrications. But they believed her because she's family, and I'm just the girlfriend. Mike sided with Darla and told me I ought to apologize to her. For what reason? For offering advice that his mother requested? He claimed I didn't grasp family dynamics, and that his sister was experiencing a difficult period. Yeah, no kidding. We all recognize that. But seemingly the solution was to tread carefully around her and never propose anything that might help her situation get better. I attempted to explain to Mike how unjust this was, how I was merely trying to assist when his mom sought my opinion. He stated, "You don't understand. Darla's always been sensitive. You should have known better than to imply she needed to work." As if proposing a job as a distraction was some awful insult. He kept repeating phrases like, "That's just how Darla is," and "You have to comprehend how our family operates." It was as if he anticipated me to simply accept being treated poorly, because that's how their family functions. The most awful part is that Mike never defends me, not a single time. When Darla began spreading rubbish about me to the rest of the family, he simply stood by and allowed it to occur. When their mom began treating me differently, he claimed I was imagining things. When I was uninvited from family events, he attended without me, and stated I was being dramatic. I recall this one occasion we were meant to go to his cousin's wedding together. I had purchased a new dress and all. Then 2 days prior, Mike informs me that perhaps it would be better if I didn't attend, because Darla is still upset and doesn't want any drama at the wedding, as if I'm the one who causes drama. I asked him if he was still attending, and he said yes. Naturally, it's his cousin. So he went without me, uploaded a lot of pictures of him enjoying himself with his family, and then arrived home intoxicated at 3 a.m., discussing what a wonderful time it was. I felt so left out and wounded. There was another occurrence at Thanksgiving where I spent hours assisting his mom with cooking, and then when we sat down to eat, Darla declared that she had set aside the seat next to their mom for Tim's wife, the spot I was about to occupy. I had to shift to the table's end beside some distant relative I'd never encountered. Mike simply observed it unfold and uttered nothing. I'm tired of having to cope with Mike's behavior whenever he visits his family. Our most recent major argument occurred after he returned, labeling me controlling because I requested him to stop drinking, as he becomes aggressive and has uttered very hurtful remarks, and a liar, when my arrhythmia was triggered after a huge disagreement. And I asked him to leave me alone because I wasn't feeling well due to anxiety. That evening was especially terrible. He'd been at his parents' place for a family meal that I wasn't asked to. What a surprise. He arrived home visibly intoxicated, staggering through the doorway around midnight. I was already in bed, but got up when I heard him knock over the lamp in the living room. When I asked him if he was okay to drive, He began this outburst about how I'm always watching him and attempting to manage his drinking. He knows about my heart condition. I've had it since I was a teenager. It's usually under control with medication, but stress and anxiety can provoke episodes. That night, as he was shouting at me, I could feel my heart beginning to pound and flutter. I told him I needed to sit down, that I felt unwell, but he claimed I was feigning it to avoid the discussion. Like, yeah, I'm totally manipulating my own heart rhythm. That's a skill I picked up. I wound up locked in the bathroom, using my emergency medicine and attempting to settle down while he pounded on the door, instructing me to cease being so dramatic. When I finally came out, he had passed out on the couch. The next morning, he hardly recalled any of it and claimed I was overstating how bad it was. We've been living together in his place for more than a year. I don't have many things to take with me, but I paid half of everything, fully paid for groceries and for the electricity bill. I even bought the couch we sit on and the TV we watch. I paid to have the bathroom retiled when the shower began leaking. I bought new curtains for the living room and bedroom. I replaced the old microwave with a new one when it died. Regardless of how much I contributed, I wasn't treated as an equal, and his mother told me to my face that no matter who or what happens, his main priorities are clear. After this, I got the ick and decided to leave him. That conversation with his mother happened at her house. Mike had gone out to the garage with his dad to look at some car thing, and his mom cornered me in the kitchen. She started off all nice, asking how things were going at my job, if I was enjoying living with Mike. Then suddenly she says, "You know, Mike's always been very family-oriented. His priorities are clear." The way she said it, looking me straight in the eye, made it obvious what she meant. I would never be a priority for him. He has attempted to initiate sex multiple times, entering the room late at night or trying to corner me in the kitchen. I treat him politely, but I've already lost the urge to save our relationship. It's as if a switch flipped in my mind. One evening a few weeks ago, I was in the kitchen making tea, and he approached me from behind, starting to kiss my neck. I just felt nothing. Actually, worse than nothing. I felt repulsed. I offered an excuse about having cramps and returned to the guest room. He became quite annoyed about it, saying I never want to be intimate anymore and asking if I was cheating on him, as if the only reason I wouldn't want to sleep with him is if I was sleeping with someone else. The guest room has, in a way, become my sanctuary. I moved most of my clothes, my books, and my laptop into that room. I spend most of my time in there when I'm home. He's grumbled about it a few times, saying we're like roommates, not partners, but he never asks why I might be distancing myself. He never thinks that his actions and his family's treatment of me might be the problem. I'm sad, but I'm eager to end this. I found a new place and will depart after he leaves for his morning workout. He's very disciplined about his gym time, so I know I'll have at least 2 hours. He goes every morning at 7 a.m., comes back around 9:30 a.m. I already removed my documents and other important belongings, and what little I have at his place fits into my car. I've been gradually moving things out when he's not present. I began searching for a new place about a month back. Initially, I was simply looking through listings, telling myself I was merely curious about the market. However, then I discovered this small, one-bedroom apartment close to my job. I signed the lease last week and received the keys 3 days ago. I intend to let him know after I've left, but I never imagined it would reach this point, and I'm somewhat worried. Not that I'm attempting to excuse or shield him, but I know it will be a hit to his ego, and I don't want to provoke his emotional instability. I bring this up because I've observed how he reacts when his friends dismiss him. He's the kind of person who cannot cope with rejection, any kind of it. I recall when his friend Jake ceased returning his texts after Mike became too intoxicated at Jake's birthday and made advances toward Jake's girlfriend. Mike was fixated on understanding why Jake was ignoring him, continuously checking if Jake had read his messages, driving past Jake's apartment to see if his car was present. It was frankly a little frightening. Moreover, his best friend from college ended their friendship some time ago, and he became depressed for weeks. They'd been friends since freshman year, and seemingly the guy grew weary of Mike's drama and drinking. And another friend he intended to try and start a business with ended their association, and Mike was somewhat worried because he stopped eating and spent all his leisure time in bed. He didn't shower for about 4 days, and his mom had to come over and essentially compel him to get up. I don't wish to be accountable for him spiraling, but I also can no longer remain in this relationship. The business situation was actually somewhat of a red flag I should have given more heed to. Mike and this guy, Chris, were planning to start a type of home renovation business together. Chris possessed the skills and experience, while Mike had some money saved. They were in the initial planning phases for months, discussing company names, looking at trucks to purchase, and so forth. Then abruptly, Chris withdrew. Mike asserted it was because Chris received a better offer from another company, but I subsequently discovered from a mutual friend that Chris grew weary of Mike altering plans, arriving late to meetings, and failing to fulfill commitments he made. I don't believe anything could be said to mend our relationship. Too much has occurred, and I don't think I can overcome how his family treated me and how he simply allowed it. The trust is gone. The love is gone. All that remains is this empty routine we're both enduring. Edit. Thanks for all the comments. Some of you are quite harsh. Ha ha ha. But I appreciate the advice. I'll provide an update tomorrow after it's completed. And to the person who inquired, no, we're not married. Thank goodness. And no, I'm not pregnant either, good heavens. Also, for those suggesting I should just speak with him, you're not understanding. I've attempted to communicate with him on multiple occasions. I've tried explaining how his family makes me feel. I've tried telling him how hurt I am when he doesn't stand up for me. He either dismisses my feelings or promises to improve, but nothing ever changes. I'm weary of having the same conversation repeatedly. Update. I suppose many people wanted me to provide an update, so here it is. Apologies for taking a few days to post this. It's been quite a lot. I didn't anticipate more than 60 comments on my initial post. Truly surprised at how many people are invested in my silly relationship problems. Ha ha. Firstly, thanks for the advice and tips. I updated my mailing address as soon as I found a new place. Some of you were correct about that being important. I already had a few packages redirected. I also made certain to update my address with my bank, credit cards, and other crucial accounts. Another action I took was to double-check that all my vital documents were together. Birth certificate, passport, social security card, all that sort of thing. I discovered my passport was expired, but that's an issue for another day. I barely slept the night before because I was extremely anxious. I kept having these scenarios unfold in my mind where Mike would return home early or somehow ascertain what I was doing. I believe I perhaps got 2 hours of sleep in total. The intention was to depart in the morning, but matters became complicated. Last night he attempted to initiate sex by entering my room. Thankfully I hadn't packed anything yet. All the unassembled boxes were kept in my closet, so he didn't notice anything out of place. I did keep most of my things in that room and had created a list of items around his place that I needed to load into my car. I'd been updating it for weeks whenever I remembered something else I needed to take. Also, for those who were concerned about trackers, seriously, some of you have watched too many crime shows, haha. I took my phone to the IT booth at the mall to check for trackers, and likewise for my car. Nothing, which was a relief. I was probably being paranoid, but I guess it's better safe than sorry. The guy at the IT booth looked at me oddly when I asked him to check for tracking software, but he did it anyway. He probably gets a lot of paranoid people in there. He left this morning for his workout at his usual time. I watched from the window to make sure his car actually pulled out of the parking lot. As soon as he was gone, I got to work. It's wild how much stuff you can accumulate even when you think you don't have much. I immediately packed the boxes and my suitcases and took the rest of my belongings. It was actually less stuff than I thought. It's funny how after living together for over a year, all my things fit into my crappy Honda. I had to make 2 trips because I couldn't fit everything at once. I was so nervous during the second trip that he'd come home early and catch me, but thankfully he stuck to his usual schedule. I left the couch and TV even though they were technically mine. It wasn't worth the trouble, and I didn't want to give him any reason to allege I took anything. Besides, I couldn't have moved them on my own anyway. Before I left for good, I glanced around the apartment one last time. I texted him regarding my decision once I was out and secure in my new place. I kept it short, simply stated that things weren't functioning between us, his family dynamic was too toxic for me, and that I had moved out. I mentioned we could schedule a time to speak later if necessary, but that my choice was final. He called me right away. Virtually seconds after the text, I nearly didn't answer, but decided I owed him at least a conversation. He did not receive the news well. He charged me with selfishness, using his family as a pretext, and sexually devalued me by labeling me a cold fish for not wanting to be intimate with him. He stated I was frigid, and that was the genuine reason our relationship faced issues. Because evidently, a woman not wanting to be intimate with a man who lets his family mistreat her is truly the issue. Additionally, he had moments where he apologized and pleaded with me to rethink things, but then reverted to hostility within the same call. It was strange, like I was talking to two different people. One moment he'd be saying how much he loved and needed me. The next, he'd be telling me I was a selfish bitch who never cared about him. It was pure emotional whiplash. He repeatedly asked where I was, if I was with someone else, and insisted on knowing my new address. I declined to give him any of those details. He said he was returning home at once and we had to talk in person. I told him that was not going to occur, that I'd expressed everything I had to say. After nearly 30 minutes of back and forth, I hung up because he was making me both anxious and angry, and I couldn't let this impact my health. My heart was already pounding and I was feeling lightheaded. I took my medicine and tried to calm myself down. My hands were trembling so much I could hardly open the pill bottle. Then for about 3 days, nothing occurred. I thought maybe he'd settled down. Maybe he'd come to terms with my choice and was moving forward. No such luck. The texts started arriving at all hours, sometimes apologetic, sometimes mean-spirited. He'd text at 2 a.m. saying he missed me, then at 6 a.m. calling me dreadful names. It was draining just to see the notifications appear. His mom also called me, a call I ignored. She left a voicemail stating we had to discuss this matter and that I was breaking her son's heart, as if his feelings were the sole ones that counted. Then Darla stepped in, sending me this lengthy, disorganized message on Facebook stating I'd never merited her brother and how the entire family was glad I was gone. If they were so glad, why couldn't they simply leave me be? I blocked everyone in his family, but I'll be changing my phone number shortly just to be certain. I've also blocked them from my social platforms. May even deactivate for a period simply to find some tranquility. It's draining to handle all this commotion while I'm attempting to settle into my new home and advance with my life. I'm worn out because my condition leads to tiredness if I don't rest adequately for prolonged durations. The pressure from all this has exacerbated it. I feel drained because my condition brings on weariness if I don't get sufficient rest for long stretches. The strain of this entire situation has worsened things. I feel as though I could sleep for 7 days. I've been attempting to look after myself, eating suitably, taking my medicine, and getting some gentle exercise. But it's difficult when my phone continuously illuminates with messages from Mike or his family members, utilizing various numbers to bypass my blocks. Currently, I'll be concentrating on other matters to prevent excessive thought. I'm not keen on dating as this experience has made me feel quite pessimistic about relationships overall. I believe I'm fine being single for a bit, or perhaps indefinitely, who can say. The idea of experiencing all this once more with another person is simply draining. Thank you once more for all the guidance. It truly assisted knowing I wasn't entirely insane for feeling as I did. At times, when you're caught in a detrimental situation, you begin to question your own views and emotions. Perusing all your remarks made me understand that my emotions were legitimate and I wasn't overreacting. I've been receiving some odd direct messages from men attempting to console me or something. Please cease. I'm not aiming to date anyone at present, particularly not random individuals from Reddit. Edit 2. Oh my goodness. Stop inquiring about my address. I'm not going to disclose my whereabouts to internet strangers. Are you out of your mind? And no, I'm not uploading photos of my new residence either. Some of you are incredibly creepy. Now let's move on to the last story. I am a 45-year-old man, divorced for 5 years from my ex-wife, Sarah, who is 43. Once our divorce was finalized, Sarah received primary custody of our 3 children, even though she had been unfaithful to me throughout our marriage. I firmly believe, and have thought from the start, that she only sought full custody to ensure child support payments from me. This wasn't about the children's welfare or what truly benefited them ultimately. She was aware she couldn't depend on alimony because I possessed clear proof of her infidelity with my former best friend, Thomas. The records I had collected from a shared laptop we used would have made it impossible for her to obtain ongoing financial assistance via that route. Instead of fighting a battle she might lose regarding alimony, Sarah cleverly influenced our oldest daughter, Maya, into thinking I was the villain of our family's story. Maya was 15 during the proceedings, making her old enough for her preferences to be considered in family court. Completely ignoring the years I had dedicated to being a good father to her, Maya testified against me, asserting I had anger management issues that made me dangerous to her and her siblings, and that it would be in everyone's best interest if I had restricted access to them. These assertions were entirely fabricated, but coming from my own daughter, they held considerable weight in the courtroom. The court regarded Maya's testimony very seriously, just as I had anticipated, and granted Sarah primary custody. I was initially provided only supervised visitation rights and compulsory counseling, following which I was permitted unsupervised visits. These supervised visits were mortifying for me, needing to engage with my own children under the observation of a court-appointed supervisor as though I posed a danger. Throughout these visits, I usually only saw my 2 younger children, Noah, who was 8 then, and Emma, who was 6. They were the sole ones who appeared truly saddened by my absence and pleased whenever I came to visit. Even once the supervision requirement was removed, Maya kept on avoiding these visits completely. Presently, Noah is 13 and Emma is 11. Lately, during our usual weekend visits, they've been informing me that Sarah and Maya have been bickering often in recent months. Based on what they say, the disagreements have been growing steadily more intense. Maya is now 20, and whenever she returns home during her university holidays, she seems unusually stressed. The children have noted that she frequently looks distressed and withdraws to her room following these arguments. I found this astonishing, as Maya had always been Sarah's preferred child. After the divorce was finalized, Maya entirely ceased communicating with me and never clarified why she fabricated her testimony, leading me to lose custody of my children. I always suspected Sarah had influenced her, but I never learned the exact details of what had taken place between them. Last weekend I went to Sarah and Thomas's house. Yes, they married after our divorce, to collect Noah and Emma for our customary weekend together. I usually wait in the driveway, and the children come out to greet me to avoid any needless interaction with Sarah or Thomas. To my astonishment, Maya emerged with them. This was completely uncharacteristic of her, as she typically avoids me altogether, even retreating to her room when I arrive to collect her siblings. She came up to my car and stated she truly needed to speak with me about something significant. Her manner was grave, and I could sense she was anxious. I was stunned by this abrupt shift in conduct, but instantly dismissed her, informing her I had no desire to discuss anything with her. Despite 5 years having gone by, and her being my daughter, I've never been able to pardon or overlook what I endured due to her untrue testimony. The anguish of having my reputation destroyed by my own child in court was something I couldn't easily overcome. I left with Noah and Emma as fast as I could, spent the weekend with them doing our usual activities, and when I brought them back home, Maya tried to talk to me again. I ignored her completely and departed promptly, not wishing to engage in what I assumed would be a conversation that would only reopen old wounds. Following that encounter, Maya began calling me repeatedly, something she had never done in all these years. Actually, I still had the same phone number from before the divorce, and she had never once used it to reach out to me. She began sending text messages stating she urgently needed to speak with me about an important matter. 2 days ago, I eventually gave in after receiving multiple messages daily. It was clear there was something serious she needed to discuss, so I agreed to meet her at my house, primarily out of curiosity about what could possibly be so urgent after years of silence. She arrived that evening exactly at the time we had agreed upon, and as soon as she stepped inside, she began apologizing profusely. She told me she had misunderstood me completely and had made the worst mistake of her life by testifying against me in court. She seemed genuinely remorseful, which caught me off guard. Confused by this sudden change of heart, after so many years, I asked her to explain what had led to her testimony in the first place, and what had changed her perspective so dramatically now. To provide some background, I only found out about Sarah's affair with Thomas after she had filed for divorce. She handed me the papers, admitted to the affair as if it were a minor point, and behaved as though the choice was already made. I first attempted to save our marriage and told her I was prepared to work through it for our family's sake, but she maintained that she wished to build a life with Thomas. After several days of feeling devastated by the breakdown of my marriage, anger and humiliation prevailed, and I chose to contend for everything in the divorce. Nonetheless, I aimed to keep our children out of it, convinced that they shouldn't endure more than needed from their parents' issues. I simply wanted to retain my assets, the house, and all we had constructed together during our marriage. I believed I was entitled to these things, considering the conditions of our separation. Sarah was not pleased with this setup, as she recognized she'd be left with very little, particularly since Thomas was facing professional difficulties at that point. His business undertakings had not been fruitful, and he was between jobs. That's when the custody dispute truly began. She understood that child support was the sole means to secure money from me continually. As our younger children were too young to significantly sway the court's judgment, she concentrated on manipulating Maya by fabricating numerous things to portray me as the villain of our family drama. According to Maya, Sarah persuaded her that I had compelled her to give up her medical school education when she became pregnant with Maya. This was wholly untrue. Sarah had chosen to leave medical school by her own choice, determining that the strain was too great for her during pregnancy. She asserted I had pushed her to be a stay-at-home mom after Maya was born and we got married, when in actuality it had been a shared choice, founded on what we believed was ideal for our family at the time. Sarah also told Maya that I had treated her as if her sole purpose was to bear children, insisting she provide me with at least 3 kids, and allegedly planning for a 4th. Yet another total untruth. We had both wanted children, and each pregnancy was planned and consented to by both of us. Sarah persuaded Maya that I merely cared about her when she was pregnant with my children, but otherwise never displayed any concern for her welfare or aspirations. She asserted this neglect had compelled her to seek solace with Thomas, who allegedly showed authentic interest in her as an individual, rather than solely as a mother. She convinced Maya that I was the villain in their love story, and that I was intending to defraud Sarah of everything she merited in the divorce. Child support, she said, was the sole means to obtain anything from me, portraying me as someone who would leave her impoverished purely out of malice. Maya believed every word without questioning any of it, simply because it came from her mother, with whom she had always been close. So she testified against me, repeating the untruths her mother had told her as though they were proven facts. Thomas and Sarah also persuaded her to cease communication with all grandparents because they disapproved of the couple's actions, and they wished for Maya not to discover the truth about me from other family members who were aware of the actual situation. She never doubted them even once, fully embracing their version of events. Lately, though, Maya re-established contact with her maternal grandparents after her grandmother had a heart attack. Sarah and Thomas were clearly displeased by this renewed connection because my former in-laws chose to disclose past realities to Maya. They urged her to speak with me personally to uncover the truth on her own, instead of persistently depending on the biased account she had received. Maya stated that this was what she and her mother had been disputing for months, with Sarah attempting to stop Maya from reaching out to me, which merely heightened Maya's doubts. At 20, she's not as naive as she was at 15, and her mother's desperate attempts to keep her away from me and her grandparents had started to seem suspicious, rather than protective. Maya recently grew convinced that she was used by her mother as a pawn in our divorce, and she wanted to talk to me about possibly suing Sarah for the damage she caused to our relationship and to my relationship with my other children. As soon as she mentioned this idea, I instantly turned it down. I told her I didn't wish to get involved in any more legal battles. I'd had enough legal drama to last a lifetime. The idea of going back to court, facing lawyers, judges, and the whole system again filled me with dread. She insisted, stating that she had stolen years of our father-daughter relationship, that her mother deserved consequences for her deceptive behavior, and maybe she did, but I had no interest in returning to court. It would be a waste of my time and resources, as well as being emotionally draining. Now that Maya understands the truth and I've moved on with my life, establishing a new routine and stability, the only thing I might consider is asking Sarah to modify our custody arrangement so Noah and Emma could spend more time with me. Beyond that, I wish to avoid any legal confrontation. It's not about fear, it's about practicality and maintaining the peace I've managed to find after years of turmoil. But Maya continued to press the point, growing more fervent about the need for justice and accountability. Eventually, my patience wore thin with her persistence. I told her I understood her guilt about what happened, but in truth, she had let herself be manipulated, even though she knew at heart that I was not the kind of man her mother described. She had spent 15 years with me before the divorce, and had first-hand experience of my character and conduct. She wished to be her with me before the divorce, and possessed first-hand experience of my character and conduct. She desired to be her mother's champion at that time, and now she sought to be mine. I told her to cease meddling in affairs that no longer concerned her, seeing as she's 20 years old now. There's no custody agreement hindering her from spending time with me and making amends for her past behavior. As for her siblings, I would manage that matter myself through suitable channels, but she needed to cease urging me to do something I had no amends for her past behavior. Interest in acting simply because she felt guilty about her part in the past. She seemed stunned by my stern tone and impoliteness. She left without saying a great deal and has not reached out to me since that confrontation. Now I'm questioning if I was too harsh with her, if my lingering resentment made me dismiss a genuine attempt at reconciliation too abruptly. Am I the jerk for telling my daughter to stop meddling and trying to play the hero in every situation? Update 1. After sharing my story and reviewing the comments, I realized I hadn't been in regular contact with my former in-laws for many years, so I was unaware they were still trying to encourage Maya to reach out to me. I recently spoke with them to inquire what precisely they had told Maya, and they confirmed they had, indeed, encouraged her to contact me. They explained they hadn't told me about this because they didn't want to unduly raise my hopes in case she decided not to reach out after all. They knew how distressing the estrangement had been for me and didn't want to add to that pain if their efforts proved unsuccessful. I conveyed my thanks for their intervention and support. They had also given testimony for me during the custody hearing along with my parents, which had created an awkward dynamic in our relationship, but we had maintained some contact over the years despite the complications. However, due to my demanding work schedule recently, I hadn't spoken with them in months. We had drifted apart somewhat, not due to any conflict, but simply the natural distance that sometimes develops when people aren't actively in each other's lives. I'm grateful they chose to intervene in this manner because Maya has at last learned the truth about her mother, thanks to their efforts. This signifies I can now apply for shared custody of Noah and Emma, which marks substantial progress, and I'm immensely thankful for their part in making this feasible. Before I proceed with my update, I wish to clarify something significant regarding my prior custody attempts. I have endeavored to secure shared custody of my younger children in the years after the divorce. I tried twice via formal legal avenues, but Sarah fiercely resisted any modifications because she understood the younger children represented her sole claim to child support payments from me, as Maya was already an adult at that point. I dislike admitting it, but she and her lawyer were rather effective at painting me negatively to the court, utilizing Maya's earlier testimony against me and implying that nothing had altered concerning my supposedly volatile disposition. My own lawyer advised me to wait and construct a more robust case before attempting again. For the past 3 years, I opted to wait, rather than squander my time, energy, and resources on what appeared to be a losing battle considering the precedent already set. It's intricate and extends further than I've outlined, but I assure you I did my utmost within the limitations I was encountering. Regarding the update, I chose to talk with Maya after all, and settle our differences because after pondering for a few days, I understood that fate was offering me another opportunity to re-establish a bond with the daughter I had lost to Sarah. I couldn't dispute that after Maya was born, my challenging profession left me with scant time for her, and it was mainly Sarah who spent her days and nights tending to her. I wasn't entirely absent from her life, but understandably, having spent more time with her mother, Maya formed a stronger connection with her. As I noted in my original post, Maya was Sarah's preferred child, and they had always had a unique bond that sometimes caused me to feel like an outsider in their relationship. I endeavored to see things from Maya's perspective, and I understood it would have been hard for me to question my own mother either, considering their closeness. She committed an error at 15, a major one with enduring repercussions, and she persisted in trusting her mother up until recently. That's a reality she'll need to accept for the rest of her life. She opted to fabricate about me and damage my connection with her siblings for years, and that too will remain with her perpetually. These are not minor wrongdoings that can be readily overlooked or disregarded, but the fact that she recognized her error and came to me to atone holds considerable weight. After much thought and inner debate, I decided to at least speak with her, instead of outright rejecting her apology. So earlier today, I telephoned her and said I was prepared to talk with her again. If she wished to resolve matters and start rebuilding our relationship, she could come to my home that evening so we could have a proper face-to-face conversation. Regrettably, she had already gone back to university in another state, but we arranged to have a video call so we could at least discuss things temporarily until she could visit personally. That evening, we connected by video, and after brief, uneasy greetings, we got down to business. Neither of us quite seemed to know how to act after so many years of estrangement, but we both acknowledged the importance of addressing the issues directly. I voiced my profound disappointment that for 5 years she never once questioned the tales her mother had told her, never tried to confirm them with me or with other family members who knew the truth. I also told her that considering how I had always treated her with love, affection, and regard since she was a child, I found it preposterous that she had chosen to lie for her mother, without granting me any chance to defend myself. No matter how hard I tried to move beyond it, it would be impossible for me to forget what occurred and pretend everything was fine. That was something she would need to accept as we moved forward. That forgiveness might be possible, but forgetting was not. She recognized this truth and confessed she could do nothing to alter the past or reverse the damage she had inflicted. She had committed many errors and never doubted herself or her mother's story, because she was certain her mother would not deceive her about something so crucial. She genuinely thought I was cleverly concealing my genuine character from everyone but her mother, who allegedly knew the authentic me. Now that she understood how greatly she had misread the situation, she ardently wished to atone by any means possible. Even if I didn't want to take legal steps against her mother, she wished I would at least offer her a second chance to demonstrate she could be a better daughter than previously. She recognized that some of these deeds would trouble her for the remainder of her life, and she couldn't fairly anticipate me to overlook the pain and sorrow she had caused, but she was requesting an opportunity to mend some of the harm and restore our connection progressively, under any conditions I found acceptable. After our long discussion, I told her I still needed time, as this was all very sudden and unexpected, and I needed space to process everything that had happened and everything she had shared. She agreed without hesitation and said I could take all the time I needed, repeating how deeply sorry she was for what she had done and the pain she had caused. Despite her efforts to stay composed throughout our conversation, she eventually broke down in tears, as did I. The emotional weight of all that had been lost was overwhelming for both of us. Ultimately, I'm glad we had this conversation because we were able to address many issues openly and honestly, which is the sole way to move forward from the mess Sarah created. To be honest, I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to fully forgive her and put this behind us completely, but it's worth the effort for both our sakes. Update 2. It's been a few days since my last update, and after speaking with Maya, I decided to speak with Sarah about modifying our custody arrangement so Noah and Emma could spend more time with me. I had been planning to address this issue this year anyway, regardless of Maya's reappearance, and the perfect opportunity had presented itself now that I had extra leverage. I contacted Sarah and let her know we needed to discuss the custody arrangement seriously. As I anticipated, she immediately tried to sidestep the conversation, claiming she was busy for the next few weeks with work and other commitments. Clearly, she was stalling, hoping I would drop the issue as I had in prior years, so I told her that Maya had already spoken to me extensively, and if she didn't want me to take her to court and sue her for her actions and manipulation, she needed to meet with me to legally modify the custody arrangement. I also told her I wanted her to stop receiving child support payments from me, as I knew she and Thomas had recently started a business together, meaning they weren't struggling financially anymore as they had claimed for years. I also demanded that she return the money she had taken from me under false pretenses, however she could manage it financially, or else I would take her to court with Maya's backing, as Maya was now ready to testify in my favor and disclose the full truth about what had occurred. I gave her a clear choice, either cooperate without facing legal consequences, which I preferred to avoid for everyone's sake, or face a more challenging path through the courts. It was entirely her decision which route we would take. With Maya on my side now, I felt a confidence I hadn't known before and didn't care what Sarah thought of my ultimatum or how she might describe it to others. I believed I had earned the right to stand firm after everything she had put me through for so many years. She went silent on the other end of the line and stated she needed time to consider it and speak with Thomas. Her tone had clearly shifted, lacking her typical attitude and self-assurance when interacting with me, which was precisely what I wanted to hear after such a long time. I gave her until the week's end to make a decision, but cautioned her that if I didn't get an answer by then, I would immediately consult my lawyer, and she could lose even more if we took the legal path with Maya's testimony backing my case. She grew upset and accused me of blackmail, but I informed her I didn't mind what she called it at this stage. I had spent years attempting to stay out of this predicament, striving to preserve peace and stability for the children's benefit. But now I was resolved to reclaim my money, my life, and most importantly, my rightful role in my children's lives, no matter what I had to do, whether it involved pressuring her or taking her to court. Until recently, I had felt differently about this direct approach, but I realized my reluctance came from my prior negative experience in court and the fear of losing once more. However, with Maya backing me now and prepared to testify about the manipulation that had taken place, I was no longer worried about the outcome. I felt sure that justice would finally be delivered after all these years. Update 3. The week's end arrived swiftly, and yesterday I spoke with Maya about my discussion with her mother. I wanted to ensure she understood what might be required of her if we ended up in court. I asked if she would genuinely be willing to testify in court again, contradicting her prior testimony, because even though she was 15 at the time and legally a minor, it could potentially cause problems for her, both legally and emotionally. I wanted her to fully understand what she might be getting into if Sarah refused to cooperate. She assured me with complete conviction that even if she faced personal consequences, it would be for a good cause, because what Sarah had done to both of us was inexcusable and impossible to justify by any reasonable standard. Moreover, she openly admitted that her own actions had been wrong from the beginning. She knew she was lying when she testified at the time and chose to do so to help her mother get what she wanted in the divorce. It had been a tough decision for her because she wasn't naturally dishonest or manipulative, but she did it because her mother asked her to and convinced her it was necessary, even though she hadn't personally witnessed any of the behaviors she testified about in court. Now she was prepared to do whatever was necessary to make things right, regardless of the potential consequences to herself or her relationship with her mother. I became emotional when she said this because it confirmed beyond doubt that she was serious about making amends. She wasn't merely saying these things to soothe her conscience. She truly meant them and was ready to support them with action. Nonetheless, I hoped Sarah would comply with my requests without significant resistance, saving us all from legal complications, which I wished to avoid if at all possible. If she thought rationally about her own interests, she would also want to avoid court, considering what might be revealed. Earlier today, I eventually called her for her answer, hoping she had reached a reasonable decision. She didn't respond to my first few calls, so I messaged her, stating that ignoring the problem wouldn't make it vanish, a lesson she ought to have learned by now. Ultimately, she called me back, and for the initial few minutes, she stalled and squandered my time with small talk and ambiguous statements. I directly inquired if she had an answer to my proposal, or if I needed to contact my lawyer right away, as I was growing weary of the conversation and her evasion tactics. After sidestepping the question for several more minutes, attempting to guide the conversation in different directions, she eventually agreed to my terms. Her sole request was that we keep legal counsel out of it completely, and I told her I would agree to that condition once she ensured the initial repayment would be made within the coming month. I wasn't prepared to wait indefinitely for her to start making things right. She tried to renegotiate, asserting that she and Thomas had just launched their business venture and needed time to become profitable before they could begin repayments. But I wasn't interested in her excuses or financial situation. I had given her ample time through the years to do the right thing. She had never acknowledged her mistakes or tried to make amends in any way, so I felt I owed her nothing at this point. However, being an honest person with integrity, I only wanted what was rightfully mine, not a penny more. I had meticulously reviewed the child support payments from the past few years, which I strongly suspected she had set aside for personal use rather than spending on the children as intended. Even if she hadn't misused the funds, it didn't matter legally or morally because she wasn't entitled to that money in the first place. having obtained it through deception and manipulation. I believe that's the money she used to fund her business venture initially, though I couldn't prove it definitively. My accountant had carefully calculated the total amount owed, accounting for every payment made, and she would need to repay that sum in full. I didn't plan to use the money for myself. I intended to set it aside for the children's future education and needs, but she didn't need to know that detail. I was being fair and only asking for what I legitimately deserved, unlike her approach throughout our divorce and custody proceedings. I told her to regard this as my last gesture of goodwill and to be thankful I chose not to pursue legal action that could lead to far more severe consequences for her. She kept attempting to negotiate better terms, but I cut the call short. I then messaged her, stating I didn't want to discuss it any further, as it was a waste of my precious time. I simply wanted the payments to arrive as scheduled, per the agreement we had made, and if there were any delays or problems, she could be entirely sure I would take her to court without a second thought. I also spoke with my lawyer privately, and while I preferred to steer clear of litigation for the sake of all involved, I believed it was crucial to have a formal contract outlining our agreement. I told Sarah I would forward the contract the next week for her signature. These were my conditions, and I believe they are entirely fair considering the situation. If anyone approves of my approach or attitude, is of no concern to me, because I believe that the time for consideration and leniency has long since passed. I will not put up with any further mistreatment or manipulation from Sarah or anyone linked to her, including Thomas. Update 4. A few months have passed since my last update, and Maya and I have been actively working to improve our relationship. It hasn't been easy by any measure. Sometimes I grow distant when reminded of all that occurred, and moving ahead is challenging when those memories reappear suddenly. At these times, she's wise enough to grant me space without taking offense, and afterward, we pick up our conversations and aim to resolve our issues maturely. We're making headway, slowly but surely, and I'm confident we'll keep improving our situation over time. Sarah has been meeting her obligations consistently, and I'm confident we'll keep improving our situation over time. Sarah has been meeting her obligations consistently, and I'm honoring my promise not to take her to court as long as she continues to comply with our agreement. She has also signed the contract I mentioned in my previous update, so we now have an official agreement from which she cannot withdraw without consequences. I'm slowly regaining what I lost financially, but more importantly, I'm getting back the time with my children, including Maya, which makes me incredibly happy and grateful. I know many people disapproved of my decision to forgive Maya, implying she could betray me again should circumstances change. But as a father who loves his daughter regardless of everything, I seriously doubt that will occur. We've been restoring our connection with care and consideration, and everyone makes mistakes, particularly during their developmental years when they're still honing their judgment and critical thinking abilities. I think I would be in a tough spot if people held errors I made at 15 against me indefinitely, so I'm prepared to offer her another opportunity for our relationship. I believe everything will turn out favorably in the end, even if the road to that result isn't always easy or direct. Noah and Emma have also gained from the new setup. They spend significantly more time with me now, and our relationship has grown significantly stronger. They seem more content and stable, no longer trapped amidst adult disputes beyond their comprehension. I've been careful not to speak ill of their mother when they're around, regardless of all that's transpired, because I believe that would only damage them ultimately. That's all I have to report for now. I'm happy and faring well generally, despite the sporadic challenges that still emerge. Thank you for your support and advice during this entire process. It has been exceptionally helpful to have external viewpoints on this intricate circumstance.